Good morning, everyone. It's Tuesday, November 2nd. This is the Curriculum Committee meeting, and we're just going to go around the table and introduce who's here. I'm Erin Dove, school board member and clerk.
Tani Schmidt, school board member.
Erin Foss, program administrator for the curriculum department.
Laura Jackson, assistant superintendent of teaching and learning.
Jennifer Boyer, assistant in curriculum and instruction.
Tina Van Roo, district data and assessment coordinator.
Carrie Hughes, student services coordinator.
Jen Wimmer, superintendent.
Alyssa Beardser, elementary school counselor, Fair Park. Emily Melstrand, director of student services. And I do just want to mention that I have the entire elementary school counseling team here this morning, but I didn't want everybody seated at the table just so that we were able to maintain space. So we'll introduce them when we get to our part of the presentation.
Jill Reese, director of K-8 education.
Okay, we have a couple items on the agenda today, and first we're going to start off with update on district and school report card, and Laura's going to start us off with that.
Yep, thank you very much. So Tina Van Roo is here, and she's is our district data and assessment coordinator. So she's going to walk through some changes for the state accountability report cards. We did not have a state accountability report card released last school year. The physical appearance of the report cards has changed, and some of the information that will be included on it is different. So our report cards are not publicly released at this point. We expect that embargo to be lifted sometime during the month of November, but we wanted to give an overview of what changes have occurred on the report card and what you can expect to see. If you remember last year, we looked at the the draft of what was proposed and the current report card. And so we kind of looked at those differences, and Tina's going to share the outcome of what will be included on the report cards.
And this is the State Department of Instruction.
Correct, the Wisconsin Department of Public Instruction. And every district in the state gets a report card. And they're typically done annually, but last year there was not one released. So again, they're embargoed, so the information on here is not district specific, but it does give an overview of what will be included.
And we do anticipate that that will be lifted. We just don't have an exact date yet.
Correct.
I like to know which things are not in our control.
Yes. None of these. We'll probably get notice like the day before that it's going to be released.
It usually goes on the news too, so, there's public notification. Now, they send preliminary reports, and that's what we get to look at and rectify data, and then they send out the real deal to everybody.
And then when you're anticipating it being released, it's going to be from which school year?
The accountability report is for the previous school year, but it includes 3 years worth of data.
Okay.
So,
Tina will explain.
She has really good slides.
Great intro.
Yeah.
Okay, so the state accountability report cards for 2021 are going to be released soon. DPI does issue them every year to every publicly funded school. They collect data for 3 or more years to produce different priority areas. This year there are 4, one of which is new, which I'll talk about when we get to that slide. And after all the data is calculated, schools and districts receive a rating, which comes in the version of a star. The last time we received the state accountability report cards was in the 18-19 school year. Then in 1920, no report cards were issued because we had the pandemic closure in the spring of 20. And with that, they didn't collect attendance data, state assessments weren't fully issued. So a lot of the data components required to issue the report cards didn't take place because of the closure. Now for 2021, even though last year was a pandemic type year, we still successfully were able to administer and collect the data needed for report cards. So those are scheduled to be released in mid-November. So between 18-19 when they were released and now what's coming in 2021, We've had a lot of different changes. You can see all of the different ones. There is a link in the resource that DPI created that summarizes these changes, and that's available publicly. So we're just gonna go through kind of point by point, slide by slide to give you a preview of all the changes. The biggest change is just the visual change, like Laura had mentioned. So previously, there was lots of tables and numbers, and they tried to remove those and put up the new version, which is much less tables and more graphics, more visuals that are easier on the eye, kind of in like a widget format. That way, they can provide more data visually than text, and they believe that that's easier for the audience to understand. There are 2 new statements that are available. The first one on top, this is just a sample. Every district had the option to provide an optional statement, and you could provide it for your district and for each individual school. West Bend elected to provide one general statement that's going to be included on all of the report cards. The second statement is highlighted with the yellow and orange, and that's provided by DPI. They're putting a cautionary statement on every report card stating that due to the COVID-19 pandemic, to use caution when interpreting results and comparing results. As you guys probably saw when the assessment data was released from last year, that same kind of warning was given that you shouldn't be comparing yourselves because of participation rates, instructional learning options, et cetera, et cetera. So a similar statement is going to be on here from DPI.
And,
Yep.
and I personally would think that that's because each district reacted differently to whether they stayed open or not, and so I think that would be the biggest factor in any discrepancies.
Yeah, that's a huge factor. Everyone was able to kind of interpret what they did and the different educational options that they were going to give. When it came time for state testing, which is a huge component of the report card, there were some districts that weren't in person. They had further restrictions put on them by their local health departments, and they had a difficult time getting people in the buildings safely and in the amounts that they needed to test. And all those things affected test participation rates. So that's what triggered the warning for the state assessment results.
Do you need a certain participation rate to even show up?
You do not for the state report cards. Anyone who tested that is a full academic year student, which means they have the long-term enrollment over the course of the school year. If they tested, their data is in here. But this warning is supposed to cover all those different circumstances. Another big change this year is that DPI released new cut scores. So previously, the old cut scores that were color-coded to the overall rating that you saw on the report cards are now just changed to the general stars. The significantly exceeds expectation cut score stayed the same. The 3 cut scores in the middle, exceeds expectations, meets, and meets few, all widened and increased their range of the cut score. And then the fails to meet expectation decreased their range. The old cut scores were in place since the report cards first began, and they thought that this was overdue and good timing when the new report cards to be released to update the cut scores. One big change, as I mentioned in the first slide, there are 4 different priority areas where we collect and report out on data. So previously, on the very top picture, you can see that closing the gaps was one of the 4 priority areas. Closing the gaps was determined to be very volatile. You had to have a cell size of 20 kids in order for that group to calculate. So with one kid moving into or out of that group, one year you could have a gap, and the next year you couldn't. Or one year you could have a gap with a certain group of students, and the next year it'd be different. What they decided to do was remove the closing the gaps area and create a new area called target group outcomes. So basically they take the bottom quartile of your performance students and they make a mini report card within this report card. So that bottom quartile of kiddos becomes your target group. They use all the same data and calculations for achievement and growth, absenteeism, and attendance, and they just take those calculations and apply them to that target group. This year, that target group data is a little bit lagged because we did have that closure in 1920. So some of the areas are very actionable because those kids are still enrolled with us. And some of those areas, like graduation, are not so actionable because those kids have already left our system. But in future years going forward, this will really help us narrow in on the students that need the most support.
So each district is going to be, trying to think how to explain this. They're going to look at the 25% of each district and then in all those same areas. So
Yes,
is it going to be comparable then, district over district?
it will not be.
Okay.
So each district and each school gets a bottom quartile target groups.
Okay. So your target group could be different for each school?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes, so if you have a really high achieving school and their bottom quartile could include students that are proficient in that. You could have kids who have a 95% attendance rate in that. So that bottom quartile doesn't necessarily mean those are the kids that, I guess, need the most support because it all depends on the overall performance. And that performance is going to be unique to each district and every school in that district.
Does bottom quartile include the entire population of the district or just the ones that were available to test?
Available to test, and then all the data that goes with it. So it'd be our students that were 3rd through 11th grade, and then all their subsequent years prior. And that's where they can pull in attendance information and also future forward graduation information.
So, because if I was putting this together, I would consider, and you know, this is not my area of expertise, so I'm sure someone could explain to me why it's not a good idea, but I'm still gonna put it out there because I think it's important to consider that there are some districts that they had a significant percentage of their student population not coming in person and not participating online. And I think that it would be important for that group to be considered
Yeah.
as at least, to me, that would be the bottom quartile, because they're not engaged as students. So I just wanna, this is gonna be, there's just gonna be so much skewing happening. I'm afraid, but I'm glad you're preparing us for this.
When they released these sample ones last year, we all had the opportunity to provide feedback or concerns. Right? So you're not alone in that thinking, even though it's not your area of expertise, you're on the money because when we did have the closure too, and certain data lags, right? Attendance data always lags 1 year. So once this all catches up and we're seeing the most current information, that little COVID disclaimer that they're putting on here, yes, it's a nice catch-all, but you have to really know what your school did and keep in mind what your school and your district went through historically. That your reasoning is another great point as to why we shouldn't be comparing ourselves to others when we're looking at report cards. Our district is very unique compared to what everyone else did before, during, and after the pandemic. All right, this is just an extra note about the priority areas, which great segue as I was talking about how each district and school is unique. The priority areas get a certain weight applied to them, and it's all based off of the percentage of your enrollment that's economically disadvantaged. Economically disadvantaged will toggle the weighting between achievement and growth. So the higher economic disadvantage rate, the greater growth is weighted, and then the lower the economic disadvantage percent is, the greater weight that would be applied to achievement. There's also this year going to be some schools that only have 3 of the 4 priority weights weighted. Our K-4 schools, just because of the dynamic of our district, they will not have target groups this year. Target groups and growth and all the calculations that go behind it require 2 years of consecutive information for that target group to generate. And anyone who had a K-4 school isn't going to have that for these 2021 report cards. So our elementary report cards will only have 3 areas weighted towards them this year. In years past, the priority weighting was also part of the report cards, and we've never, within our own district, even had 2 schools with the identical weighting. So one more reason why each report card is unique to each school and district.
How are the priority areas determined?
So the 4 priority areas are determined by the state. The new one this year is that target group outcome. Just for this 2021, that target group outcome is going to be taken out of the K-4 calculations, and then the priority weights are determined by the economically disadvantaged. So if you had all 4 areas and perfect even data, each of the 4 priority areas would be weighted 25% equally. When you put the economically disadvantaged information in, that's what tips the scales on what's weighted heavier between achievement and growth. Does that answer your question? There is a new component to the report card that is for information only. The state is now collecting information on what they're calling course and program data. It's being collected in 2 different areas, the post-secondary preparation and as well as the arts data. This would include courses such as what we offer for advanced or AP courses, dual enrollment, so classes that match with our UW system, credentials, work-based learning, as well as any of the arts categories that we do. When the report cards do become public, we do anticipate that the information that's going to be shared on the report card for West Bend is not going to be an accurate picture of what we actually offer. There was some programming things on our end that we realized were inaccurate, that we've already established a team to correct that. There was also issues on DPI's collection end that they have identified, specifically in the area of the industry recognized credentials, that they are working to improve their collection processes. So the information that we're going to get on these report cards, again, isn't going to capture what we actually offer here, but we and DPI are both working so that when the data is collected this December for future report cards, the information will be correct and then accurately reflected on the next report cards.
Does the industry recognize credentials, is that including the TC classes?
Some, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, technical credits, CT.
We have a lot of those. So
Yes, we do. As well as AP.
For those to be reflected on there.
Yeah. Yeah, AP is another high area for us as well. So we know it's going to look inaccurate, but our plan's underway to get it all corrected and fixed. So as Jill had mentioned earlier, we already received the preliminary report cards that we could go through our data validation. Along with the assessment data and everything else that's in there, we just work together as a team to figure out what we're going to do, what are going to be our priorities, how are we going to align this to our continuous improvement plan to achieve our mission. There are a variety of resources that are linked to. Some of them were linked throughout the presentation, but all of these are available on DPI's accountability website. Once the public release date is announced, we would obviously draft something for the school board and then come to present our actual results of the report cards at a future meeting. So in prep for that, if you guys have any questions or wishes that you would want for that presentation, feel free to reach out to me via email so that I can get prepared for the presentation you desire. Any other questions?
tell you what's going to
Yeah.
I understand that this is something that the Department of Public Instruction does, and do you believe, I don't know if I believe it. I guess I just wish there was a way to report to our district how we're doing that we feel is an accurate representation of what's happening in our district.
I can speak to that, but that's one thing when we talk about reframing and updating our continuous improvement plan, and then aligning what are the metrics of success for that, and creating our own dashboard that's consistently monitored and publicly placed, so that they're, again, you look at a cumulative of 3 years, you look at, the nuance of having to understand that data versus something really concrete of, you know what, I'm focusing on early reading habits, here's how I measure that, here's my outcome, here's my target, here's the 3 strategies we're focusing on. It needs to be that clear. So as we kind of move into that, that's what we're kind of thinking about and building on the back end is our own dashboard.
Good, yeah, because the year over year, and also the consistency is, I think, the most important way to present accurate information.
And these report cards really summarize a lot of quantitative data, but there's a lot of qualitative things that we do in our district as well. I'm excited that they're including the course and program info, so it tells you what our different offerings are for credentials, TC credits, things like that. But yeah, there's qualitative things that we're doing too that aren't measured and calculated here that really speak to the different offerings that we offer, so.
Okay, I like that a lot, thank you. And then, will that include looking at surrounding districts and comparing ourselves to, are we keeping track of what they're doing too?
So everyone loves context, right?
Yeah,
Well,
exactly.
we want to look at
Yeah.
ourselves and keep continuously improving and making sure all of our metrics go up. Yep, we absolutely look around. We look around a couple ways though. At the neighbors, because of geographic location. However, then we look at things that make us actually more comparable. Who's sitting with the same population? Who's sitting with some of the same needs? We're really low spending. Who's spending the same amount of dollars? How are we leveraging those dollars? So we look at all different profiles of districts, and then we certainly collaborate across state and region on, kind of what people are leveraging for outcomes, because everyone wants the same things for kids. We want high achievement, we want access to opportunities, those kinds of things, so.
That makes me feel better.
Well, reach out if you have any questions or wants and prep for the mid-November release, and I will see you then once that's public. Thank you.
Thank you, Tina.
Next up, we have discussion on elementary school counseling curriculum.
Just in the back, check the plug-in connection, there you go.
Sorry, I wiggled that. All right, well, good morning again. I'm Emily Melstrand. I'm the Director of Student Services, and I am here today with the elementary school counseling team. And I have Alyssa Beardser here. She's going to be my co-facilitator. She knows and understands the work that the counseling team does at the elementary level in a very different way than I do. I'm still learning this process, and this group of ladies here has taught me quite a bit already. But I did want to just take a minute to introduce them. In a typical year, I may have had them sitting at the table with us, but I'm trying to be respectful of space. So we'll go around, and if the four of you want to introduce yourself and mention the school that you serve, and then know that if there's any questions that you want to direct to the entire team, they're happy to provide input as well. Go ahead, Erica.
Erica Becker, I'm the school counselor at Green Tree Elementary. Angie Horst, Jackson counselor. Sarah Brown Schweig Before. Tammy Slater McLean.
Thank you for joining us. So this morning, we wanted to share with you a couple of different things. First of all, we wanted to talk just a bit about the elementary school counseling model and how that kind of interfaces with some of the other conversations we've had around social emotional learning, both similarly and then what is different about the work that they're doing.
And then we wanted to dive into the school counseling curriculum, the elementary school counseling curriculum, and talk specifically about the work that they're doing within whole group instruction for kids. So Alyssa and I are just going to kind of tag team in this discussion, but the first thing that I wanted to just point out is the elementary school counseling model is more comprehensive than what we've been talking about over the past couple of months in relationship to whole group social emotional learning. Obviously, the role of the school counselor is to support that work, and they do some whole group instruction, just like we've talked about using the social emotional learning curriculum with Second Step as a primary resource. But in addition to that, their model is much more comprehensive and layered in that they're really looking at both direct and indirect services to students, and they're focusing on 3 different domains of student development. So they're focusing on helping students be strong academic learners, they're working with them to develop their personal and social skills, and they're already starting, even as little as kindergarten and first grade, thinking about career development. How do you work to be a contributor at some point in your life in a career? So they're focusing on those 3 areas. And what we're talking about today specifically is the whole group universal instruction. But you can see under the direct counseling services that there's really multi-tiers of instruction or support. So our school counselors do provide those whole group lessons, but then they also do small group targeted instruction. So if they have kiddos who demonstrate specific needs that warrant additional instruction, they may be pulling small groups, always with parent permission to do so, focusing on specific skills. And sometimes they have kiddos that really rise to having needs that extend beyond a small group and really require that individual instruction and support. So.
And I think just as you explained it, the tier 1 and tier 2 and really trying to meet the needs, but starting with that counselor connection, I look at these 2 boxes, and when we begin the year, going into each of the academic classrooms and really connecting with the kids so that they know who we are, we get to know them, and the focus of that really tying into the West Bend way as well as that ready to learn. And my job is to help you do your job as a student and as a learner. And there's lots of little things that go into that at the kindergarten level they may or may not understand yet, but we build upon it. And just like other areas of instruction, what you will see is that through our lessons, that a one-shot lesson in kindergarten is not going to provide the same level of growth of skills, that it is something that builds. And we are lucky enough to get to work with our students from kindergarten up through 4th grade and to work within the systems of their classrooms. So I have my red counselor connection bag, and my kids know that when I am on my way to come and learn with them, and that we are going to work together on gaining skills that are going to help them be successful as a learner. And then circling back to, that's going to help you down the road to get where you want to go. And we want to work together towards those goals. We do work within the ASCA, and in our discussions in the last, Wisconsin used to have standards as well, but they have also within our state adopted the American School Counselor Association. So it isn't that we just chose a more national model to follow. It really is where we're working within our state as we reach out to other professionals and collaborate with other people, other counselors, as we continue to grow and try to meet the ever-changing needs of our students and our schools and our families. But the standards are through the American School Counselor Association. They term them mindsets and behaviors. And so all of our direct instruction lessons are also connected to those 4 areas. We have 8 units or topics, and then within those, a couple of them are extended to meet those standards. So in 2 of the units, we have multiple lessons, but in any of the units, depending on the year and the class or the grade level, and determine needs within our individual schools, we may have additional conversation, additional practice, additional ways to develop those skills to really meet those core units. And so that it might look different each year. One class might have 2 lessons in this, and one class might need an additional to really practice like a friendship skills or problem solving.
How do you identify what the needs are that help you develop these 8 to 10 lessons?
Well, it started with the standards, and then if we go to the next, continually having conversations, we work within our building level professional learning community, so meeting with the grade level teacher teams and the behavior data that we see throughout our buildings, if there are specific skill areas that fall within, so as when we teach a whole unit instruction, it is information that they are getting, but if then the skills aren't being applied, they may have performed within the lesson or had good discussion and conversation, but then we are seeing an increase in them not being able to put them to use, then we will come back in and do an additional lesson, either with a smaller group, if it really is a handful of kids that need that extension, but sometimes it really is helpful to pull the whole class in because they support each other then. Those that are strong in the skills, they can really model and scaffold for more so than just hearing it from me. Thanks for your question.
So I just wanted to highlight a couple of things, and thank you, Alyssa. You explained this so well. I wanted to make sure that it was really clear that the lessons that have been developed are aligning with that American School Counselor Association mindset and behaviors. And all of that is available online. It's also available and linked within. Yep, we're gonna talk about that a little more specifically. But the lessons are developed by this team. So the school counseling team has spent a lot of time really looking at what are those core standards, what are those core mindsets, and what are the tools that we need to use to teach the kids towards those standards. And what I really appreciate about the plan that they put together is it allows them to be responsive, and that's really what Alyssa was talking about, is they have 10 designated lessons that they teach to every student in their building by grade level, and they're developmental and progression. So you're teaching a skill at kindergarten that becomes more complex as you move towards 4th grade. But what I appreciate, and this is a really key piece of a comprehensive elementary school counseling program, is that they're able to be responsive based upon the data, based upon teacher feedback, based upon behavior interventions in their building and such, and kind of layer on additional lessons as necessary. So if in kindergarten you have a classroom of kids who are struggling with some of those learner behaviors, and we've taught our universal lesson, they've put together supplementary resources that you can absolutely take a look at that allow them to come back into the classroom and do a subsequent lesson. And then potentially go further and say, you know what, as a class, they're really getting this skill, but I still have 4 kids who really need a little bit more. They need additional instruction, so I can pull them into a small group. And then from there, they can move to that individual instruction. So the intent within the entire progression is that they're able to really be responsive to the needs of kids. And sometimes those needs are also directed by parents. It's not always just what we see in the school environment. These are the folks that parents are gonna reach out to when they have a question or concern about their child. And sometimes that information is coming from home, and our school counselors are the folks who have an idea that a student has a need that might not be overt in the classroom, and they're able to target their instruction based upon that parent or family feedback as well.
I also think we have wonderful partnerships with our families and also with our classroom teachers, that they are in the conversation and able to add things from the day-to-day situations or real-time information that we can pull into our lessons and conversations. So it extends then far beyond that maybe half hour to 45 minutes that we are in there giving that direct instruction, because the conversation will continue and hopefully then better support more students at that tier 1 level and have less students needing that additional.
So this is just an overview of the, of the ASCA behaviors and mindsets. And we won't read through all of those, but we wanted you to be able just to kind of take a look at what are those behaviors and mindsets that kind of drive the lesson development.
And then, so under the behaviors, we really have divided out our lessons to span those 3 categories of behaviors, and the learning, starting with those learners and how they can reach out. We all similarly have a system in place called a Let's Talk slip that either students or families or teachers can send us a message and let us know that they would like us to follow up with them. And we build that into how we can help them as a learner, how they can, if I'm not in your room today, how you can let me know that we need some additional support on that. So starting with those, I'm in it with you. This year we want to learn as much as we can as a K-4 student, but then kind of going a little deeper into them being able to reflect and notice things in themselves and really focus individually on what are those self-management skills and practice different things, because unless you try them, you don't know what may or may not work for you. And what worked in 1st grade may not work in 3rd or 4th. And then applying them in those social situations.
I mean, there's nothing for me to say.
Keep going.
As they really start to then build solid friendships and core peer groups, helping them to take that management of self with them into that as well as into their learning.
Any questions about the behaviors or mindsets? And again, I just have to say, I think it's really interesting. You see in the mindsets that idea again about career success. Thinking about, that idea that being a lifelong learner is important.
Where am I headed and how am I going to get there?
And how do you set goals? Okay. So these are the 8 units of study, and I think what we'll do is, if you want to introduce those, Alyssa, we will talk more specifically about those units, and then we'll show you in the curriculum document how those units are broke down by grade level.
So and they are color-coded to fit those 3 behaviors. So the learning strategies would be the academic readiness as well as kind of the careers, capstoning, and then the empathy and the emotional awareness and mental health and coping skills, and really helping them that self-understanding. So at the elementary level, what that really looks like is, can I identify feelings of myself? Can I understand what feelings are and that feelings change? And when feelings need to do something differently, when I need to cope with those different feelings and ways to do that. And then moving on to the relationship and the problem solving skills are then taking those coping skills and helping them to then be able to work through differences as they get along and interact with different people. And our personal safety ties way to our foundation of Be Safe as one of our key components of all of our schools, and wanting them to know what can I do to keep myself safe, and some key rules that we circle back to every year and build upon as they find themselves in different life situations.
Will you talk a little bit about how this is communicated out to parents? Because I'm thinking about the personal safety unit in particular, which is really dealing with those protective behaviors. And that's something that obviously family participation and a family's ability to extend that learning is going to be really important.
And I think any of our topics are only strengthened with that communication to home, so that they too can have the conversation within their family and what does that mean for them, and how we can work together to support that. Protective behaviors are the personal safety lessons that we have done historically. So this is my 18th year in the district, and we have a letter that goes home to families prior that they can preview any of the resources, any of the books or videos, and they see the topics and the main ideas that we build upon of the safety rules of say no, get away, tell a trusted adult, and be believed are our core messages that we practice. And we talk about different situations that would be the route for them to go. But that letter goes home, and at that point, anyone can reach out. Each year I have maybe a couple families just inquiring. Sometimes it's new kindergarten families just because they haven't experienced that before and wanting, and I appreciate that they are asking the questions. I almost wish you never know how many are reading that, but I send it home paper copy and I send it home also in an email in the hopes of reaching and communicating as much as possible. And I think with a topic as important as that, it is really good for them to know that it is something that we value the time each and every year to circle back and build around them making safe decisions and supporting them in doing it.
So we're going to jump into the lesson structure next, and again, I just want to reiterate, all of the objectives are aligned with the ASCA mindset and behaviors, and the lessons are broke up. I mean, it's going to look really similar to you because we tried to use a very similar format to the one that we're using for our universal social emotional learning. It's familiar, people know what to look for and how to interpret that information. So you're going to see the key vocabulary and concepts, and you're going to see that at the unit level, and then you're going to be able to look at the individual progression K4. I want to point out that there's primary and supplementary resources. What is different about the elementary school counseling curriculum in comparison to our universal social emotional curriculum is we've identified a single primary source. Or resource to support social emotional learning at a universal level in that second step. The school counseling curriculum is not based upon a single resource. They don't have one single primary resource. It's really the compilation of different resources that they've vetted and determined to be very appropriate in supporting growth towards those specific learning objectives. So you're going to see that some lessons are built on a set of supplementary resources that allow the school counseling team to pick and choose a different story each year to support their learning. And some of that is, that progression is really important. And Alyssa and I talked a lot about this as we were thinking about today. Sometimes you'll present a lesson to a kindergarten group, and you're going to use one children's book to illustrate your concept, and then there's some extension learning activities. And then the next year in grade 1, you might want to introduce that topic with the same book that the kids read in kindergarten because it provides them an anchor to remember and understand. And then they'll add to that. Sometimes they're choosing supplementary resources based upon the specific needs in the classroom. Sometimes it's based upon student interest. So you're really going to see a set of materials supporting each of the lesson formats. And then I already talked about the importance of being responsive to student needs and the fact that a key component of this curriculum is that family communication and engagement. So I'm going to jump over here. Oh no.
You're logged in as me.
I am logged in as you. You know what? Yeah.
This is what happens when you have really good security.
That's all right. I am going to
I did not block it, it wasn't.
Hang on, I can actually, I'll just give permission. Oh, you know what? Actually. Oh, you know what? I'm just gonna plug my computer in.
Can I do that?
Yes,
Just
just
whenever you
plug
want the back, plug yours in.
Can I just mention something? For for people who don't maybe know a lot about our training as counselors when we're in graduate school, we've talked about, especially like, with Sarah being new, we don't graduate and they say, here's your beautiful curriculum, go forth and teach. It's not how it works. In fact, there's very little that they talk about as far as this piece, especially at our level. So I really have appreciated sort of the term homegrown, but it's homegrown with lots of thought and research and networking and cooperation and our own collaboration. So I think we've worked really hard. I mean, a lot of the base was here before I even came. So it's been a long time. We're continuously working to find, more resources to engage students and resources that are more refined and developmentally appropriate. So I just feel like it's kind of noteworthy. And then also, when I work with interns that I come to learn, I know like Marquette for sure, they've really, like our elementary curriculum is really good, and that they want to send students to really, because it's not a part of their, coursework, they want to send them our way so they can see, just how refined. And then many of my interns that have gone on, they've come back, oh my gosh, there's no curriculum where I'm at. Can you help me? And so we have really pushed that forward too. So I think it is noteworthy that people don't understand.
Yes, thank you for speaking up. And really, anybody who's here, as part of this committee, I really encourage you all to contribute when you feel compelled to, because that's why you're here. And insights like that are really important to our community. When you say homegrown, I just wanna, I'm just seeking clarification. That's a customized West Bend School District product that is responsive to the needs that you've observed in our community. Would that be an accurate reflection? Okay, thank you.
When I came here, I think that was the biggest to know that I had a team to work with, and to know over the last 18 years, we meet all the time, and even in between, just to continue to collaborate and to grow, and to know that what we are doing is best for the kids in our building, but also that we are taking all of our kids and helping them transition into the next level. So we do a lot of collaborative work with helping them be prepared for Silverbrook or whatever is next after their elementary experience.
I really appreciate that we're not just taking a curriculum that's come from somewhere, and we're just, without even thinking about it or processing it, sending it out to the kids. We're not cookie cutter. We are intentional and thoughtful with what we teach our kids, and we are in charge as a district ourselves of what we put in front of them.
I have to say, I so appreciate that you're saying that, because wouldn't we love to have graduated and given this, wonderful thing? So thank you for saying that. If there was that magical piece out there, it would be easier. It would be so much easier.
It would be a time saver.
Yes, but it's not. So this is collective work year after year after year, and we've really dedicated a lot of time.
And please know that it's always based on our standards and always based on our own research. I remember years and years ago, Angie and I took a trip up to Fond du Lac to visit ESTAP, which is an abuse prevention, one of the best around. And then we've also partnered with local abuse prevention. So when we say that the parent information letter and the protective safety lessons, it is based on research, and our bully lessons have been heavily researched as well. And what is best practice, and then there's up and coming new things in bully prevention. So those are always factored into the language that we use in our resources.
And that's actually a really good transition to one of the things I was thinking about as you were talking, is I think it's really important that we recognize this is a curriculum that should be evolving based upon the needs of the kids in front of us. And we've talked a lot about as a team about, this isn't really intended to be a one-time conversation and then we'll see you in 3 to 5 years. This really should be something that we're coming back and talking about, on an annual basis. What modifications need to be made? What are we seeing in our school community that we need to be responsive to? And this team has been phenomenal about thinking about that and how we continue to shape this conversation moving forward.
I appreciate how it's both proactive and reactive. So as a community, you might be seeing a general trend, but what's happening in her second grade classroom may not be happening in her second grade classroom, and able to adapt for that.
And that's that idea of being responsive.
But yet I appreciate the framework
Right.
of the curriculum standards, so that it's not the Wild West either. It's not just, I'll just walk in the room and feel like whatever I'm reacting to today. It's not that either. There's
There's a scope and a sequence.
Yes.
And actually, just so you're aware, they did, our counseling team brought a lot of their materials, a lot of them are children's books. They're here and we can make those available to all of you and to the public as well, if there are people that want to pop in and take a look at those materials. So let me just orient you, and Alyssa, you can help me out here. This document is very similar to what you have already seen when we talked about universal instruction for social-emotional learning. You can see at the top that it describes the mindsets. It breaks those up into the 3 different behavioral areas, or I should say it breaks up the 3 behavioral areas. And you can see that each of those categories is broken down into very specific learning objectives. And then as we move down, there's a description about what instruction looks like at the elementary level. And it really talks about the fact that there's a minimum currently of 10, 30 to 45-minute lessons that are taught to children in grades kindergarten through 4th grade. It reiterates all of the things we've already talked about in terms of alignment of standards. And then, if you scroll down, it will work through the entire scope and sequence of the curriculum. So we can go to the individual unit. So if we want to click on empathy, it will take us to the unit description. And this is really kind of the overall unit, K4. And you can see it will go through, what does this unit align to in terms of mindset and behaviors? What are the concepts and vocabulary that are targeted? What are the primary resources? And then what are those supplementary resources that allow the school counselors to be responsive to different or individual needs? Go ahead, John.
Is this book list, is that available on a website for review? I know that's been something that's been in the national news lately. We don't want we're not hiding anything. We're very proud of the books that we use, and I just, even just if the list is available, I appreciate this being able to review them here, but also just for people that want to order them at home or check them out of the library.
Is
that list available?
Absolutely easy. I mean, this is something we will post online, so
Okay.
families will have access to that. And our intent would be after this discussion today, we can do that. But it would be super easy just to cut and paste those into a single document to make that easier for families at home to view.
And at the end of this, just
Good idea.
Thank you.
comprehensive
Yeah,
list.
that's a great idea. Yeah. So I didn't want to walk through each of these lessons this morning, but if there are specific units that you wanted to talk about in greater depth, if there's questions that you have specifically related to any of the lessons, we're happy to do
Just
that.
to clarify, there's 10 lessons per year, right?
Correct, a
Okay.
minimum of 10
Okay.
lessons per year. And again, depending upon the needs of kids at different grade levels, we may add additional lessons using those supplementary resources, but still focused on the same learning objectives. Any questions? So our next step is really, I mean, we want to get this posted. We want people to have the opportunity to look at the materials materials and review the scope and sequence of lessons. We'd like to bring this to the full board for discussion with your recommendation to do so. And then move towards an action to approve this as our elementary school counseling curriculum.
And I think,
All right. I think what's important is that in historical years, things that our counselors do in schools have been seen as a service. They're responsive, they're reflective, they're building this. What we're trying to kind of navigate as a district, the expectation for you as board members is to make what's occurring in our classrooms transparent and accessible to our families. So we are really leading the way in shifting a mindset of seeing what is a service by articulating it, sharing it, making it accessible, and treating it like a curriculum. Anything that's taking place in our classrooms, whole class. So again, this is a way that West Bend is almost leading the way, because not many, right, in your profession, you're just going in and being able to be responsive. So we're really putting it out there, treating it like a curriculum. That's why it's coming forward in this way. And especially just on the heels of, you can see the connection and the difference between social emotional learning that might happen in our classroom as well. So it's a different thing, but we are treating it as a curriculum. So that's why it's coming forward in this way. Any questions about that?
I mean, I really appreciate how this is set up. I would love to have this when my kids were in elementary school, to be able to have the same conversations at home. I think we're being very transparent. I'd love to see this come annually just as a review item and see any changes that have come up.
And again, the team, in addition, they'll defer and say it's a whole team back at the school level, and it really is, in partnership with teachers, psychologists, counselors, principals, there's whole teams. But I think it's important when you look at and bring that conversation back annually to do a check-in, it gives you a sense of the pulse of what's going on in the buildings and in our students and children's lives, and how we can be responsive and help them be academically successful and be ready to take advantage of opportunities that we're wanting to provide to them throughout their career. So.
Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, discussion of 7-8 social emotional learning. That's a good segue.
You turned that. Give me 1 second.
Yeah.
To reshuffle.
Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Go ahead. Yeah. Absolutely. Can we take them? We can take
We
5
can
minute
take
break.
them, yeah.
All right, well, we will move on to the next agenda item on our curriculum committee agenda, and that is the discussion of 7th and 8th grade emotional learning. And my strategy, oh, you're okay, I'm sorry. My strategy for this morning is really to kind of unpack the feedback that we had shared as a team at the last committee meeting at the end of October. And I just wanted to give you a little bit of information to support the discussion this morning. So if you remember, we built that feedback on October 25th on a variety of different resources. We had community feedback that we reviewed really specifically, and we're thinking about how to be responsive to that community feedback. We had feedback from our student services team and our administrative team, and I want you to know that one of the things that we have done since the last time we met, in addition to going through all of that feedback and thinking about potential paths forward. We also asked our 7th and 8th grade student services team, so our school counseling team, school psychologist, to look through these lessons again, and they have multiple times, but to also give us some feedback from their perspective and to be thoughtful about kind of that next layer of support, which would be their ability to be responsive to kids who, within the context of some of these conversations, might have feelings or thoughts that are triggered that warrant some type of follow-up. So I want to bring that up because I think that's a really important component to this entire plan. It isn't just about the lessons that we are using to instruct students on a given day. It's how do we make sure that we're responsive and that we're following up in the event that any student shows any kind of big emotion or response that really triggers some type of intervention or support. So they spent a lot of time thinking about that and talking about ways that they would be prepared to support 7th and 8th grade students if that happened. We also talked about the importance of that family communication piece, and very much like the elementary model or the elementary curriculum that was approved at the board meeting the other night, there's a supplementary parent or family communication structure. And so these are going to kind of go hand in hand, and as we make changes or modifications to this plan, we're going to also reflect those in that communication document that is used both to communicate to families, and it's also really intended to be a support structure for teachers so they know what they need to be focused on within those individual lessons. So, and Tim, let me know if there's,
He'll be right back.
okay, I'm not sure how to visually show this in a way that makes best sense. But what I'd like to do is I'd like to start with 7th grade. And in the document that was connected on board links or on board docs, you noticed that there was a 7th and 8th grade tab, and I highlighted them in red so that you could easily pull those out in preparation for today. But we designated the individual lessons based upon the feedback from curriculum committee in October. So some of those were identified as lessons that we are looking to remove. And then there were some that we identified as lessons that were in need of review. And then we identified some of the lessons that were lessons that we wanted to supplement with additional information. And then lessons that required no action. And so I'm actually going to ask you for your feedback today. The removed lessons were the ones that we identified one of two themes. Either they were themes that really addressed community involvement or community learning as opposed to individual learning, and we wanted to be conscientious about that community feedback on how that could be misinterpreted. And then also the initial lesson, which is really tailored to set kids up for understanding the second step resource. So I don't want to say that it's like a commercial, but it has that kind of feel to it where it's really talking about second step. And we had identified that that probably was less important in the scope and sequence, and our recommendation was to remove that and then to replace that with a West Bend School District developed lesson that focuses on who can support you. So we're still going to talk about, just like the initial lesson did, what might you face in middle school, but it's going to be based upon West Bend School District, and then the primary focus is on, and who can support you with that. So I don't want to ignore those lessons, but my recommendation would be that we move to the review lessons, and we've kind of already established that these are the ones that we're removing. Are you comfortable with that?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you, yes.
So the first lesson in grade 7 that we recommended for review was creating new pathways in your brain, and there were actually two different pieces of feedback related to this. The feedback really focused around the idea that some of the content felt anti-family to some of the community members. And then there was also some question about whether or not the lesson was teaching students that they had ownership over kind of how their brain processed emotions. And so our discussion notes, and I won't read through all of these, but we really talked about the fact that you know, the lesson really is trying to illustrate how your brain processes big emotion. And the idea that, you know, you have a center in your brain that kind of responds quickly, and then it moves to your cortex, and when that information moves to your cortex, that's the point at which, when your body is calm and regulated, you're able to be responsive to that. So any discussion related to that lesson?
So I think the first part, row 6 up there, that you just talked about doing the supplement at the beginning of the year about trusted adults. So I think that kind of, I mean, that answers the questions there.
And that was the piece related to just kind of remembering the importance of engaging families and not teaching in a way that excludes families.
Right.
And that's one of the things in the communication document that we will emphasize for teachers again and again, is really the importance of reflecting back to who are your trusted adults. And your trusted adults are people at school, but your trusted adults also extend to your family. And sometimes friends and neighbors and other people that support you.
And the video about creating new pathways in your brain,
I'm sorry, Erin, I mixed that up with a different lesson. You're corrected, you're talking about a video and I was talking about a different lesson, I apologize.
It's talking about how the brain works and how you can have control over that and process your feelings. And working on that, I mean, that's something we have to work on our whole lives, but it's extra hard at this age. It talks about do, feel, think, and how to use those feelings to strengthen your brain and create new habits. There was a piece in there about a dancer that was not doing the right moves at the right time, and training her brain to make it a habit to do the moves correctly. I don't see an issue with that video. I think it to stay in.
I would do. Yeah, I think it's an appropriate age for kids to learn how their brain works and that it's their own brain and they, maybe you can speak to this. I know I tried to talk about it in the last curriculum meeting, but I'm not the expert. But
I think it's in that control and self-regulation, and you can't use that as an excuse.
Exactly.
Either. It's helping them, a child feel empowered and understand, no, it might feel like you're out of control and sometimes, but you're in control of you.
Yes.
And here's how that looks and feels, and you're helping develop a skill.
And
It's like that
here's your
internal locus
emotions
of
and-
control and that power to internally choose, right? And giving students that way to, you know, like Emily's saying, train your brain to do those things.
And even knowing that feeling will pass, you know, with some deep breaths and removing yourself from whatever stimulation is triggering. I mean, I think it's very appropriate to start learning about these mechanisms and reactions.
And it sets the framework for some of the subsequent lessons that really target the things you just talked about, which is recognizing how your body's feeling and applying a strategy that might allow your body to calm down before you respond. So they build on each other, which was one of my concerns about eliminating that lesson.
I think it's, like you said, it's actually critical. It's a critical lesson.
And that was not a lesson that was flagged as a lesson of concern or review by our 7th and 8th grade student services team. I just scrolled over to check. So
Can I just talk really maybe broadly, and this is just my opinion, but when we're breaking out, for example, this next one, learning from mistakes and failure, activity 1 and then activity 4, I think we have to be really careful about eliminating just pieces of that, because this isn't a PowerPoint slideshow, so now we're depending on the teacher to skip that piece, where it's meant to just hit the next button and go to the next activity. So I think we just have to be mindful of that and what that would look like if we would just eliminate one part. That's just my opinion. I'd be a little hesitant to do that. We're all humans, so there's chances that that could be bypassed.
So I appreciate you saying that, and I do share that concern. I think we have to be thoughtful about, if removing a lesson is easy, right? I mean, we can clearly identify that for teachers, and that's gonna be easy for them to follow in the scope and sequence. I also worry about cutting up individual lessons, because I think that increases the likelihood of human error, and we wanna be transparent and we want to make sure that we are teaching to our students what we are communicating to our families. With that, Erin had mentioned to me at a different meeting, she had mentioned the idea of, would it be easier in some of those scenarios where we recognize there might be additional content that's going to support the learning in a way that honors some of the community feedback? And could we do that through the modification of the student handouts? So if there's specific lessons where you feel like, I really like this content, I don't want to lose the lesson, but I think it's important that we balance this out by adding additional information. It's so much easier to go in and create a new student handout and provide that to our teachers in advance, decrease the likelihood of error and create that balance. And I thought that was
I really
very
like that.
good idea.
There's a student handout with each of these lessons. So, yeah, you explained it well. I'm hesitant to remove an activity because it's all in that same lesson and they're just clicking through the slides. So now you have to, click 3 times to get past that, versus a student handout that we can supplement if we like the lesson but just want extra.
And that's easy to control because that's something we can do, at the beginning of the year. Our school counseling team really are they're really supporting the rollout of all of this system-wide. And that's something we can charge them with in terms of, can you put together all of the handouts for each of your teachers so it's available to them at the beginning of the school year and they're not depending on going into the system and printing it. Here you go, and then we eliminate the likelihood of error. And I don't know if other folks have thoughts about that, but I appreciated that suggestion.
It seems like it would be less complicated to develop than trying to modify technology, not to mention that then we run into other issues.
Right. And we've talked about the fact that, we've been communicating with Second Step and we're hopeful that they're going to consider different options within their technology platform, but they're not there yet. And as we wait for that to happen, I'd really rather create structures that we know we're easily going to be able to manage. Thank you, Erin. Okay, learning from failure and mistakes, or from mistakes and failures. There was feedback on activity 1 and activity 4, and if you remember, this was the lesson that really focused on a boy named Manny who loved to read, but he didn't have very many books at home. And some of the concern related to that being maybe a negative thought about his family, because it really wasn't clear as to why he didn't have books at home. And then at the end of the lesson, there's an activity that really leads kids to making a social media account or a website. And really, the context is that Manny was doing a book drive and he was using social media as a venue for getting community involvement and getting more people in the community or in his school community to contribute books.
Okay, so we had discussion about this at our last curriculum meeting, and we talked about, what few books could mean. You brought that up. It could mean he only has 20, he wants 100. I would like to keep this lesson. I think it is, I don't think it's anti-family. I think you get to see Manny collecting donations of books for other students. I think it shows he's charitable and giving.
I think one of the pieces was around the social media
Okay,
aspect of it.
Yeah, that's activity 4.
And I think that when you double checked, it gave a range of options. You weren't really posting something.
Correct.
Either.
Right,
Correct.
so he made flyers, and then he observed that his peers were on their phone and was trying to figure out how to reach them, so then he decided to do social media, because he's like, oh, they're on their phones, that's how I'm gonna get them to donate books. So I feel like, wow, he's innovative and observing. But I do think we talked about doing also a supplement about technology. And
Yes.
when, in this case, he's using marketing, which can be done a million different ways. You have flyers, you have print advertising, but then you also have websites. So I'd like to see this stay, but then have supplement on technology, proper use of it, parent permission, whatever that looks like, and then offer other suggestions to get the word out about your project or something like that.
And reinforce that it doesn't mean that you have to have your own social media account. It could mean asking the trusted adults in your inner circle to use their social media accounts to promote his project, and we're not, certainly not, we want to respect the parents who choose to not have their kids have the social media account. I mean, I don't.
Yeah, I agree.
As much as many kids have social media accounts at this age, I agree that it's probably not the best idea. So I think there are a lot of people that share that. But at the same time, I'd be blind to assume that kids aren't aware that they're out, that they exist. So I would rather we teach them how to manage that than to just turn a blind eye and pretend like they don't exist.
I think it'd be a good spot for an explicit connection back to the digital citizenship conversations and lessons.
Yeah.
And just like we talked about kind of infusing that concept of who are your trusted adults throughout multiple lessons, there's opportunity to do that with that supplementary lesson as well. And, one of the things as we removed a couple of lessons that makes it really easy is we can just insert where we've taken out a lesson with one of the Homegrown or West Bend School District created lessons. And then that needs to be tied into that communication plan that I talked about, because at the beginning of each unit, we'll remind teachers there are lessons in this unit that it may address digital citizenship. Please be sure to kind of reiterate these concepts or the importance of, balancing what we do at school with what your rules and expectations are at home.
My kids are all adults now, but when they were in middle school, at the school they attended, middle school was when they started talking about when you put something out on social media, it's there forever and you can't take it back. And I would rather these kids learn about that before they're old enough to be posting anything, so they don't have to learn the hard way. And I think that's a good idea.
Yeah, I agree. I almost think it should lead at the beginning with the trusted adult lesson, but then also be inserted when we have these call-outs to be able to revisit them. I made my kids sign a phone contract when they got social media, so I get it.
And as soon as the kids are at an age where the device comes in, so
Yes.
you know, that's early on.
Yeah.
They're starting to get lessons in digital citizenship that are age appropriate because you have to teach them how to use the device and use that safely.
Do we include asking permission before posting a photo of someone else, for example?
In the digital citizenship
Yeah.
process, yes, but I don't remember where.
Okay, okay.
Yeah.
But that's something we can look at, because that's, I mean, you're recalling that lesson where
Yeah.
that was one of the
Yes.
specific
Right.
scenarios, is that it was an unflattering picture. You know, and I hear that in my 15-year-old daughter
Yeah.
in
Yes.
conversations, you know, so-and-so posted a picture and it's not one that I like myself.
Well, and I even ask my own kids before I
And I
post a
post
picture
it.
of them on my account,
Yeah.
even though they're my children, because I want to model that conversation that I hope that they have with their friends, or just even providing awareness that you should
Right,
can take that into consideration.
exactly. I have to ask permission of my kids to post a picture of them, so.
And that's
Yeah.
just like, that's a respectful component of personal safety that you're modeling for your student, your children. And that comes highly recommended from developmental groups focused on child safety and mental health.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, so identifying roadblocks was the next lesson that was identified as for review today, and that was activity 4. And this was a lesson where, let me think about this, I believe this was the lesson where there was a young man who wanted to work at a animal shelter, and his parents had identified that he was too young for that responsibility. And actually, there were multiple reasons for why he wasn't able to volunteer. That was one of them. Let me see, I need some notes here. So the question was related to the anti-family and whether or not there could be an additional scenario that addressed roadblocks that might not be connected to family. And
The roadblocks that I saw, there was only one that talked about family, so he was being diverse in his thoughts. He had no bus money, he was nervous to talk to the shelter director, and he had little experience with animals. And then his parents also said he was too young. I'd like to keep this lesson. I think it is teaching, Mark realized he had these roadblocks that he was feeling discouraged from, but then how to overcome those roadblocks to be able to do what he wants to do.
And potentially ask his parents for, I'm stepping up to ask for, I'm asking you to guide me, what do you need to see from me in order for you to feel like I'm responsible enough to do that? I think that is very mature, and that's the conversation I would hope that would trigger with the parent. So I see that as a positive thing.
the other thing I wanted to point out related to that particular lesson is the conversation really focused on Mark's roadblock and his scenario, but there actually are 2 scenarios connected to that lesson. Mark's feels like more of a home-based situation because it's something that he wants to do outside of the school day. But there was actually a second scenario about a student who is looking to present information in front of a large group of kids, and she's a student who uses a wheelchair, and the stage isn't accessible, and she's very nervous about presenting. So there was a school-based option in addition to that more out-of-school or home-based option. So I just wanted to point that out because I think it's important that we're looking at the balance, as that, you know, that's certainly a theme that was represented in the community feedback.
I like, we can do both, right? I like both of them.
Okay. The next lesson, and I apologize, it's hard to get it so that you can see it on here, but it's the gender-based harassment.
Did we skip over
Did
the
I
what
skip
is
one?
harassment?
Yeah, didn't I? Here it is. I know it's hard to do it on this spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets, don't get me wrong, but they're not the best for presenting. So what is harassment is the next lesson, and that was also identified as in need of review. And initially, our conversation really focused around some of the definitions that are included in that lesson. And if you recall, we were talking a lot about the definitions around bullying and cyberbullying and harassment. And, you know, I think this is definitely an area to have some discussion around. I did add some additional notes in there that, you know, the lesson really starts out by identifying class norms and the importance of following class norms and being respectful of the privacy of others. So one of the things it talks about and tries to set the framework around is we're having conversation as an entire class about subjects that can bring up, you know, big emotions or feelings, and that it's really important to be respectful of that, not to share things that are shared by other people. It also clearly directs students to talk to a trusted adult if they need help or they want to talk. And I will tell you that our 7th and 8th grade student services team also identified this lesson as a lesson that they would preload for teachers, letting them know this is a lesson that might trigger some of these thoughts and emotions, and in the event that a student communicates something or represents something on the handout that requires follow-up, here's the process for making sure that we do that to support that student.
I was gonna say, because sometimes what you're talking about triggers something behind it, and the reaction is not necessarily about the lesson itself, it's about something else.
Exactly. And what do those conversations trigger for different students? Which is also one of the reasons we want to be really thoughtful about making sure that our communication to families precedes the lessons, because sometimes families can predict that this is going to be a hard conversation for my student, and either I'm going to prepare them to participate in it, or depending upon what they're thinking about in terms of what it could trigger, they may decide, I'd really like my student to sit up for this lesson because this might be too difficult in front of a group of students. But it gives parents the opportunity to do that. The other thing I should mention that I didn't early about that communication structure is, in addition to communicating the intent of each unit and lesson, there's always a try this at home or question for your student. And the intent is really to allow parents, it gives them a prompt to engage in a conversation with their child about the lesson that they're learning, so that they can extend the learning, that they can shape it based upon their family values, or so that they can follow up on something specific related to what they know about their child. But some of the questions related to this particular lesson focus both on the definitions, specifically that the definition of bullying connects to the idea of real or perceived power imbalance, and that bullying occurs if that exists and that negative behavior happens over time. And then there was also a question related to the fact that there is a slide that provides 3 pieces of information to specific subgroups, and is maybe not as comprehensive as we would like it to be.
I'd like to see this be supplemented with a student handout. They talk, I think this is the one where they provide some stats.
Some data, yep.
And I'd love to see that expanded beyond the couple that they give.
Is that so that kids don't feel alone in that? Like, when you hear a statistic that, 1 in 4 kids are subject to X, then, I guess kids that, when they have to deal with adversity, they often feel like they're the only person that is in that situation, and it can be comforting to know that they're not the only, potentially the only ones, without getting specific and oversharing and making themselves even more vulnerable.
Yeah, I guess I don't know exactly what that would look like,
Yeah,
but
but-
I'd like to let the professionals
Yeah.
give me some ideas.
Yeah, there's absolutely, I mean, we can absolutely represent more students in those statistics, and we can work that into a handout. And I do think it's important that we recognize, I mean, the couple of statistics that are presented, and I have it written here. I have to, let me take a look, because I can't remember off the top of my head. The slide references hate-related graffiti, students of color, and LGBTQ as a subgroup. And I think what's important is that we recognize bullying happens within the context of all kinds of different relationships. It isn't about race, it isn't just about culture, it's about all sorts of different things. It can be about, you know, I'm the better, stronger athlete, and you're trying to be a part of the team, and I'm engaging in behavior that makes you feel threatened. And I think it's important that we do illustrate that it happens in all kinds of contexts. You know, the hard part is the real or perceived power imbalance is a piece of that definition, and I know that that presents some discomfort based upon some of the community feedback that we receive.
I mean, that is what bullying is though, because you're not gonna bully someone unless you feel like you have power over them. But it, like you said, it could be a sports team, it could be, I got an A on this test, and it could be a wide variety of
It could
things.
be, I have nicer clothes than you
Yes.
do. I'm more popular than you are, and I feel like I can use that as a leverage point. So I do think it's important that kids understand bullying happens within the context of all kinds of different relationships.
Mhm.
Understanding that you said this lesson in particular brings up emotions for kids and can bring kids in maybe like to the counseling office or something, would it make sense to have on that handout people they can reach out to after the lesson if they need to?
Yeah, that's a great idea, yeah. And that's one of the nice things about modifying the handouts.
Totally.
You know, that's an
Yeah.
easy.
Personalize that.
Yes, we can absolutely personalize that, and what we could do, so the elementary counselors talked this morning about how they have their counselor connection slips that
Yeah.
kids fill out. They have a similar model at the middle school.
nice.
That is electronic based, so kids know how to go on and make a request to a
Right.
counselor. I mean, we can put that information right in that handout.
And that handout goes to the parents too, right? Because
It-
even parents might want to reach out, and, I mean, our community has resources even outside of the school district that are.
Right, I like that. I mean, you were talking earlier that a lot of the counselor connections they make are via a family request.
Right. So what we could do, so the handout goes to the student, and we're depending, I mean, 7th and 8th graders sometimes give things to their parents. I can tell you mine are hit and miss. But what we could actually do is identify that resource in that communication structure that goes home to families.
I'd love to see that for all of them.
Yeah.
When you're communicating, this is the lesson upcoming, this is the student handout they're gonna be receiving.
Yeah, before is I preferred to after, in my opinion.
So the way we're set up right now, the handout doesn't go home to the parent. The handout is part of the instructional time with the students.
Okay.
But what we could do,
But these supplemental ones?
Notification.
we can add the notification on how to access counseling support. Now, we certainly could create a structure where those go home ahead of time, but it's gonna probably go home via an email link or something to that.
Well, I am also thinking some of those student handouts were, like introspective, like
Yeah.
they weren't being shared. This was a student
Right.
being able to express their stuff in private to themselves. So I do
You know what would
see
be,
the value in that too.
what we could do, Joe, and this probably would be the easiest way to make that accessible. Any modified handout that becomes a West Bend School District developed handout, we just link that in the curriculum document.
Yeah.
That's what we were just saying, we're like, just put it right in the document.
It's like I heard you.
Yeah, there you go.
I mean,
that way
it's
it's
accessible all
there.
year long.
And you can look
Yeah.
at it at the beginning of the year.
At any time, right before that lesson occurs to reorient.
Yeah.
Okay. I think it's so important, as parents have expressed through this, that they want to be identified as good resources for the students, but also we know we have a bevy of resources in the district, that we just continue to share that with students as they're going through these lessons, because something could come up in one lesson and not in another, or a situation could happen, and so the more we can give kids access to all of those things, I think it's really important.
Yeah, I think the trusted adult thing has to be woven into so many of these, and whether that's the school counselor or their mom, you know. Yeah, I think we need to keep talking about that.
Okay, so what I'm hearing you say is this lesson is important, but we are gonna make some modifications to the student handout, so that it is representative of bullying beyond just the groups that were identified in the statistics provided. And we are going to really throughout the lesson structure, strengthen the acknowledgement of how you can access school counseling support, both for parents and for students.
Yes.
Yes? All right. I'm just watching Carrie take copious notes, she's got this. Okay. So the next lesson is related to gender-based harassment. And, you know, the primary concern about this particular lesson really focused on gender stereotypes and some community feedback around whether or not those are conversations that we embark upon in a school environment. And I will tell you that our student services team did identify that this is certainly a lesson that can create strong emotions, and that it would be really important in teaching this lesson that the teacher prefaced it by making sure everybody felt emotionally safe and reviewing those norms, recognizing that not everybody needed to contribute out loud, that some of these are things that you're gonna kind of work through internally.
And that's gonna be communication to the teachers ahead of time.
Correct.
Just because things bring up big emotions doesn't mean we shouldn't talk about it. That might be where a student seeks counseling or seeks someone to talk to. That's just my personal opinion, that just because something is emotional doesn't mean it's bad. There's a couple things in this lesson. I kind of liked the warm-up because it was a true-false question. All kids are on social media 24/7. So I feel like we just kind of talked about that. And it was false, and it gave, it said this is an example of a stereotype. So I thought that was kind of cool that we're tying social media into that. The activities in handout in this lesson were not necessarily LGBTQ. There were 3 examples. One is a girl that has short hair and athletic clothes. 2 is a boy that doesn't play sports, has a lot of friends that are girls, and does art. And 3 is a girl who plays online video games, mostly male-dominated. So to assume that those are all LGBTQ is making a very grand assumption and stereotype, which we just talked about in the warm-up. The video, I know, can probably stir some emotion, but I think it represents a slice of our student population. And to ignore that is ignorant. And I'm for keeping this lesson.
The next lesson within this unit was titled Our Rights and Responsibility. And there were two pieces of the lesson that were identified as areas to reconsider. One of them had to do with the definition section, and then one of them had to do with the video. And initially, the question around the definitions was related to whether or not the definitions were accurate. And the two definitions being identified were right and a responsibility. And what was a little bit tricky about this particular lesson is that the section that the teaching category that's called define, where you would expect to see the definition, really gave examples of what is a right and what is a responsibility. The definitions were provided at some point in the lesson, but I think that the piece that was being referenced in this feedback was really related to a slide that was giving examples. So for example, the slide said, what are your rights? And you could click on these little dots. And one right was to have a safe school environment that's free from harassment, or the right to stop harassment if you experience it, and the right to report it. And then again, under responsibility, you would click on the little dots, and the responsibilities were, you're responsible to not harass others, you're responsible to report harassment, and to be truthful in your reporting. That particular segment is not giving a definition at all, it's really just giving examples. And one of the worries was that if the definitions were misrepresented, is that suggesting that we are not in alignment to lawful authority? I think the concern was that the definition of a right had some mention of lawful authority.
One of the docs that you mentioned, you have the right to stop harassment if you experience it and report it. And so the and report it to me is I can report it to a trusted adult, whether that's my teacher or my neighbor or a police officer. That's how I read that. I don't see that as anti-authority. I see you're going to someone for help if you are being harassed. We're just talking about define right now, right? Not the video yet, right?
Right, and they kind of they do go hand in hand.
Yeah.
Because that
Because I think if we get rid of it, the lesson, we get rid of the lesson. We don't get rid of an activity in it. That's my point of view.
That would be my recommendation too, that either we supplement it or we eliminate it. But to pick and choose within the specific lesson is going to create complexity that could result in error.
I think this is a good follow-up to the lessons preceding this, the what is harassment and the gender-based harassment, and I think there's probably some more in there about if this is all happening, or to you, or you see it happening, what can you do? Also, we want school to be a safe place, so you have the right to a safe school environment, I think is important.
So we did talk about the fact that, one of the concerns also was the idea of who would you report to, and that's kind of what you were just mentioning that, Erin.
Yeah.
And I did make a note in here that, again, I think this is a lesson where we tie in that conversation back to who are the people that support you. You may not feel comfortable reporting it to the principal, but you might be comfortable sharing it with your mom or a teacher who can then relay that information and help that stuff.
And
So-
then the video,
Yep.
the thing was
video-
about ignoring, right?
Yep, this was where a student came home and told his parent about some harassment, and the parent responded by making the suggestion that he should try to ignore it.
And then there was another example, where a girl told her grandma what was happening to her, and her grandma, outright said that's not right. I mean, ignore is a strategy. It might not be the best one, but I know there's been situations in my life where my child comes home about something and I'm like, well, just ignore it, see if it goes away. I feel like that's, for a minor thing, that might be a step one.
Right,
And then
it's a
from
first,
there-
it's a first step, but it's not always the last.
Do we talk about other strategies somewhere else? Because maybe this is a potential for a supplement too.
So, yes, in the multiple bullying lessons do address strategies. And a lot of them are focused on recognizing bullying and then reporting bullying, using assertive words to stop bullying. So the strategies are embedded in different places. We could definitely reiterate that in the handout, these are your rights and these are your responsibilities, and how do we work together to ensure that we have an environment that's free of harassment and bullying, and restate some of those strategies there. And one of them is seeking help. I mean, this is sometimes a problem that extends beyond that kind of minor problem that you can manage all by yourself at 7th and 8th grade, and might extend to that more major problem where you need to seek help if the strategies you're employing aren't working. How do you get help?
Can you remind me where the bullying lesson it falls in here? Is it before this? Is it after?
It is, yeah, it's in this green unit, and I think I have to scroll down.
Sorry.
No, that's okay.
Because I know I read it somewhere, the strategies, and I just don't know where they fall in relation to this.
So there's, and it may not even be on this list because it might not have been
You know?
one that we.
I don't, I just can't watch while she moves it.
So I think under the harassment, what is harassment and what is,
Okay, so it's
sexual
in kind of
harassment?
the same unit, it's just right
Correct.
before it.
So is it unit 2,
Um,
Emily?
Without looking at it, I don't remember if the bullying unit is lesson 2. I think it is. Hold on.
Unit
It
2.
is unit 2. Yep,
Okay, so it's in the same unit.
yes.
Because your concern is, as you said, you don't want students walking away with that being isolated and only hearing one strategy.
Yes.
So ensuring that the lesson that gives a wider array of strategies precedes that or is packaged with this.
Yes.
So that kids don't walk away with this one example thinking that's the only
Right.
option for them.
Carrie, I don't know if you can, as we're talking, you just log in and check the progression of those lessons.
Yeah, I feel like if it's all wrapped in there and it's been talked about and they just know that ignore was one of those, then I think that's fine. I just don't want it
And you're
standing
saying
out
if
there
it's
by
not,
itself.
To
Yeah.
reinforce those.
Okay, we'll jump back to that one. But we'll move forward to the next lesson, which was emotions matter. And I apologize because at the very beginning of our discussion, I actually referenced this. I mixed this up with the first lesson that we reviewed. This is the lesson that deals with the amygdala. And the concern was that it might have been suggesting to kids that they couldn't control their emotions, that it just happened in their brain and they weren't responsible for that. And, as we reviewed this lesson, we talked a lot about how it really is illustrating both that immediate response in the amygdala and then how the thinking part of your brain, the cortex, is where you make the decisions. And there were two concerns. One of them related to the video and the fact that that might suggest kids aren't in control of their emotion. And then the other one related to the discussion part and defining the concepts.
So I just like to just talk about them together. The lesson is about teaching students how to move from that emotional, automatic part and then how to think it through and react. And Tom, you kind of said it, like maybe you have to take some deep breaths or count to 10 or skills like that. The activity in this lesson shows the difference between an overwhelmed cortex and a thinking cortex. So if you're overwhelmed and just reacting, this is the scenario. If you give yourself some time and think about it, this is the result of that. So I thought they did examples of how to cope and react. So I don't see any change needed to this lesson. I don't know, then, for discussion.
Yeah, I'm in alignment with that.
Okay. The next lesson is also in Unit 3, and that emotions matter sets the kind of the framework for Unit 3, and it's really focusing on recognizing your emotions, responding to your emotions, and then thinking about how that plays into problem solving. So the next lesson is called Feel, Think, and Do, and there were 4 pieces of feedback that we were reviewing. The first piece of feedback, it really relates to the statement. On a slide, it makes a statement that a student says they suck at soccer. And I will acknowledge that that's probably not the word that any of us maybe would have chosen if we were creating a lesson for a student. It is a word that students use. And I had indicated I may just send an email to Second Step and just indicate that, you know, that's not our preferred language. If that's an easy fix, they were pretty quick about responding to our other feedback. That might be something that they're agreeable to just replacing with a different word. But I do think there's some other important pieces to this particular lesson that I would hate to lose in entirety because of that particular word.
So I'm just gonna talk about feel, think, do as a whole because there's 4 different lines in this document. Suck is not a favorite word choice of mine. We don't really use it at home. I let it be used in certain contexts where it's super appropriate. I think it's also maybe a little bit in denial that your 7th grader isn't saying or hearing the word suck. So I would love it if you'd reach out to Second Step and maybe see if they'd be willing to change it. I stink at soccer. I don't know what that looks like. But to remove a whole lesson because of that one word, I don't know if that's worth it. This is the lesson where a kid, Maddox, and his dad get in a fight and the dad takes away his phone. I know for some that can be seen as anti-family, but I think there's other perspectives on that. Personally, my perspective is that that family has rules and consequences, and this gave Maddox an opportunity to think about what he did to cause his phone to be taken away and how he could have reacted differently to the fight or how to deal with that. So I think this, yeah, he had these feelings, he didn't think, and that was the result of it. I don't see any changes needed in this besides maybe seeing if Second Step would tweak that word a little bit.
Yeah, I appreciate giving them the feedback, but I don't think it warrants removal. Whether they are able to change it or not.
The other part that I did just want to mention, one of the worries was that there was an imbalance again between scenarios that focus on an home event versus a not, like a school or sports event. And it wasn't mentioned in the feedback, but the lesson actually does have both a home example, and that's Maddox and the disagreement he had with his dad, but there's also a scenario where a video is shown that has a school-based problem where a student in the cafeteria spot, their typical spot, has been taken by another student, which is an actual problem that does happen in all of our sites. And so it also works through, like, how would you stop yourself, think about that, and respond to that school-based. So I just wanted to
That's
mention
right.
that.
I really actually liked that video because I was kind of like, I mean, the kid was sitting there eating. He just wanted to throw his stuff away. I was like, I don't know how I react either as a 7th grader.
Okay, so the next lesson, and I do want to mention, there's a lot of redundancy between 7th and 8th grade, so there's actually less feedback on the 8th grade page because I think we really have to be thoughtful about what we're pulling in from the 7th grade. So just for the sake of time, I want you to be aware of that. But practicing positive self-talk was one of the lessons asked to review. And this one really focused on the fact that the video presents that people are more hardwired for negativity. And it talks about the fact that it's trying to teach kids that idea of being aware of when you navigate towards a negative thought and how to replace that with positive self-talk in order to move you through that experience. Let's see. And we had talked about on the October 5th date that the lesson does describe negativity bias and the fact that our brains are sometimes hardwired that way. But the concern was that this might be in alignment with some of the underpinnings from critical race theory connected to thinking negatively about a particular race. Now, within the lesson, there isn't any reference to race or being racist, and the intent is really to teach the difference between negative bias and positive bias and how to move your brain from thinking about a situation negatively to a situation more positively using self-talk.
So the first video, I like the first video. It talks about that you're in charge. You can change your brain to be more positive. And then there was some feedback about not talking about hard work. There's a quote in that first video that says, "Take some hard work and real practice to make it into a habit that will turn your negativity bias into a positivity bias." So it is talking about that you have to work to tell yourself that you're in charge of your emotions and how to put that out into the world. I don't see a change needed in this lesson.
I agree.
All right, keeping cool in conflict, and this was one of the lessons that does give specific strategies for kind of helping yourself calm down in order to solve a problem. And the community feedback really focused to the absence of strategies that might be preferred within a family, like prayer or things like that. And although we definitely acknowledge that those are important within the context of a family, I mean, obviously that's not something we would integrate into our teaching at school. And I really think that that is something that the communication structure allows parents the opportunity to extend the learning at home. In fact, I think the prompt, did I cut and paste the prompt? The whole prompt asks parents to discuss other strategies for reducing stress and staying emotionally regulated. And that's a perfect venue for parents to have that conversation at home in a manner that aligns with their personal beliefs.
Yeah, I appreciate that that's there, and I think that that's appropriate. I don't think we need to add anything to the in-school that
could cause unintentional issues.
Yeah, I'd like to see this as maybe a potential extra student handout, or however you're communicating to parents that these are the strategies we talk about in the lesson: the walking away, counting, slow breathing, reframing, unhelpful thoughts, and positive self-talk. But leaving it open that perhaps there's other strategies you have in your house. So I'd like that communicated in some way, whether it's through a supplemental student handout or just in the communication up front to the parents. But I'd like to see that out there, one of those ways.
Yeah, because there's a whole range of things that a family might do together. They might go for a walk, or play catch with their dog, or, I mean, there's just so many ways a family could customize that themselves, and right, just pointing out that it's an opportunity at this point, and the timeline is considerate.
All right, conflicts and perspectives. So what the primary concern related to the fact that the lesson presents the idea of perspective taking. And the concern was that the lesson was actually addressing the idea of empathy, and that we should be more clear about the similarity or difference between those two particular themes. And I will say perspective taking is actually included throughout the developmental progression, and actually starts to be introduced pretty young in the elementary age, that idea of taking other perspectives and thinking about situations in different ways. And certainly by doing so, you're able to be more empathetic. I had suggested this might be a lesson where we can consider reinforcing that idea of empathy within a student handout, so that we're acknowledging the connection between being able to take perspectives and respond in an empathetic way, and teaching that vocabulary word in addition. And Erin, I don't know if in your review of that lesson there were other considerations.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tani said this last time, but I think you can substitute the phrase perspective taking to point of view, where empathy isn't necessarily the same thing. I see it as perspective taking is trying to put yourself in someone else's shoes based on their experiences, but empathy is really emotionally feeling what they're going through. So I think they're related, but they're not the same. And I think I'm so glad to hear that you're talking about perspective taking or point of view at such a young age, because I think that that's huge throughout your entire life on how you interact with people forever. And I think we'd have a lot less problems if we all did that a little more.
Yeah, we all come to the table with a different set of life facts. And to me, personally, that's my definition of point of view. And empathy is, like you said, is emotional, and how you respond to the realization that other people have different facts that have occurred in their life that have gotten them to where they're at. So to me, yeah, those are two different things. We can both be sitting at the same table, but have gotten here in different ways, and that's just teaching kids to think beyond their own circumstances, and realizing that we're all unique and different, and being respectful of that. That's at the core of all of this. So I think it's important.
So we will keep that lesson.
Yeah, I guess I kind of don't feel one way or the other about supplementing that with the empathy handout. I'm open to other points of view on that. I don't know.
I think the primary focus is exactly what you just described, and that's teaching kids to think about different perspectives. And, you know, that people, like you said, you can have 20 kids in one classroom, they're all second graders here in West Bend, but they have different experiences, and they might have a different perspective on a situation because of their experiences.
And we can do that without stereotyping, without generalizing, without, singling anyone out, making anyone comfortable. It's just bringing awareness to, hey, we're all unique individuals and we're different, and that's what makes us, being able to recognize that we're all individuals is what makes us a great community. So, I think it's a good thing.
It's vocabulary that carries over from their comprehension work in their literacy courses as well. And because they're trying to understand the characters and why they're making the decisions and why things are happening. So that's vocabulary that carries over from the content area.
Oh, that makes sense.
And it's an appropriate age to start doing that, and to not just be self-focused. What, would you agree? I'm Jill.
Yeah. So I think, just thinking about the empathy piece, I guess I'm wondering if that's a thread that's carried out through this, because I do think that's an important life skill and life opportunity that kids need to take from early on. And it is point of view and perspective. It's all those things, it's kind of all those things wrapped together, right? But do you know, Emily, is there like a thread of that through, I'm assuming there is. I don't know this curriculum inside and out like you guys do, but I'm assuming there is. And if that thread is in there, I don't know that we need to continue doing that. But
So-
it's just important, I think, to be threaded throughout.
But reinforcement.
Yeah, totally.
Yep, it absolutely is, and that term perspective taking is introduced in elementary
Yeah,
school. And
okay.
I'd have to look at the lessons, I don't remember the specific grade, but it's absolutely built upon.
And that's the important piece, I think, right? That it's not just like a drop-in one-time
Correct.
thing, that it's threaded throughout and it's brought back in situations and lessons and,
It becomes more sophisticated as you go
Exactly.
through and you mature and become more self-aware.
Yeah, and that's the case with most of the concepts. I mean, I don't know if you remember one of our earlier conversations, we had talked about the definition for bullying and how that definition, I mean, we start to talk about bullying in kindergarten, but the sophistication of the definition and the context around it continues to evolve and become more complex and mature. So all of these concepts are built upon. So the next section really were the lessons that we identified as needing a supplemental piece. And so I'm going to suggest that we don't necessarily go through each of these real specifically, but I just want to highlight what the primary concern was and what the potential supplement is. So advice on roadblock blocks. There was the concern that it might be missing some family, like a bit more balanced family perspective. And also some concern about social media use, and we are creating those two lessons that supplement that, and it comes back to threading that within the instruction throughout all of the lessons. Harassment, what is harassment? Had a concern about anti-family. And again, we talked about the fact that we created the West Bend School District who can support you. This is actually redundant. We talked about this up above. This was the what is harassment lesson that also has some statistics, and we had talked about modifying the student handout to be more representative of greater range of students and not just the three categories that were identified. Sexual harassment also had a
concern noted about family involvement, that it might create or have some anti-family undertones. So I acknowledged again that we have the West Bend School District who can support you lesson. And then I also wanted to just identify there that the communication prompt for this particular lesson is help your child brainstorm a list of trusted adults at school who can help, if they need help, or a peer, or if they experience sexual harassment. And I apologize, I can't get this spreadsheet to stay in one place. But the prompt is really intended to encourage parents to ask those questions. Who are your people? If this happened to you, who could you talk to at school? Who are some friends that you can turn to, and who are some trusted adults? The effects of sexual harassment, the concern focused, I mean, there was concern just in general about talking about sexual harassment, and again, that anti-family sentiment, and I don't know if you want to have greater discussion about the sexual harassment lesson. I did want to highlight again, who can support you is going to be a theme that is woven into this, and again, the family communication prompts. You know, remind your child that it's important that they tell you if they experience gender-based or sexual harassment. If you feel comfortable doing so, share an example of that you have experienced at home. And that prompt goes with sexual harassment and the gender harassment. And I'm not sure if you wanted to have any conversation about the sexual harassment component. I know at our last discussion, you had both talked about the importance of this and that we needed to be thoughtful about how we connect that or extend that learning into the home.
I think the communication that you've laid out, I think we have to just keep weaving in the who can support you / trusted adult theme. And then I really love that you're adding these extra family communication prompts, because I think that is your talking points at home. But the actual lesson I thought was fine as is.
And then moving forward, you're going to see these lessons, some of the titles are redundant, and I just wanted to acknowledge that the supplementary lessons we're creating address one of the elements of concern. So emotions matter, what makes conflict escalate, both of those had a concern identified related to anti-family, and I just wanted to acknowledge that we're addressing that.
Just an extra note, I really loved the family prompt and the what makes conflict escalate. Discuss with your child a time in your life when you were involved in escalating conflict. I think that is a great discussion, and your child can see that, you know, it's still happening as an adult and how they deal with it, and I just thought that was good.
And then the follow-up of what do you wish you would have done instead, acknowledging even as an adult we can make a mistake and we can work through it. And then asking your child if they're a part of a conflict right now.
Yeah, I really liked the wording in there, I just wanted to call that out.
And I think a lot of our kids experience some of those things internally, and we don't think to ask those really specific questions, and they don't necessarily, at least my experience with going on my 5th middle schooler as a parent, you know, sometimes you ask those questions and you get the candid, no, it's fine, but they're wrestling with something internally. Okay, and then the rest of the 7th grade lessons were lessons that were identified at our last discussion meeting as needing no action. So if you want to take a second and just look at those, and if there's any that you'd like to bring forward for additional discussion, otherwise we can pop over to 8th grade, which is a much smaller list because some of the content just carries forward.
I don't have anything else in these.
Anyone else at the table? Thank you both again for all your time connected to this. I know this has been a lot of work, but I think it's been really important to talk through these individually.
Yeah, this is, I'm really proud of this and that we're doing this.
You've been very responsive to questions and what the community asks of you as board members. So very much appreciated.
All right, so in 8th grade, we actually identified a couple of lessons as lessons for removal. And there were a couple of themes kind of guiding why we made that decision. First of all, the welcome lesson, which is very similar to what I talked about in 7th grade, where it's kind of an overview of second step, and we're replacing that with the who can support you. So we're still acknowledging, as an 8th grade student, you're gonna experience some hard things. I mean, we'll experience hard things for a lifetime, but instead of focusing on how second step can help them, we're gonna focus on how we can support them as a West Bend school district and as trusted people in their lives. We had made the recommendation to remove my future self. And really, there were a couple of themes in there that posed some question, but the idea of projecting forward on who kids are going to become didn't seem to be a necessary component of our social emotional learning. And this would be a place where we can easily substitute a technology, a digital citizenship type lesson that focuses on some of the themes that are up and coming.
This was that pre-populated table? Okay, yeah, I mean, let's keep it, but without the suggestive prompting.
Yep. Yeah, this is the one that had an identity map, and they were trying to predict forward on who they are now and then who they would become. And my path forward was similar in that it's connected to my future self. It's kind of a lesson that builds upon that. And if we're gonna remove my future self, this lesson is out of context. So removing that as well.
And those are the entire lessons, right?
That is removing the entire lesson. And then there were 2 lessons within the bullying. Hold on a second. Sometimes I have a lesson identified twice for 2 different reasons. So there were a couple of lessons in the bullying unit that were recommended for removal, and those were really the lessons, again, that focused upon community, movement as a community. So that idea, speak up and start a movement. And although the content was really specific to, how can you change your learning environment? How can you speak up and start a movement to change bullying and harassment within your school community? We wanted to be respectful of the fact that that has some underlying tones that we're not looking to promote.
I think having the discussion about bullying and what it is and how to talk about it or identify that's enough. Yeah.
And there's strong enough instruction happening that really focuses on you as an individual that this next layer may not be necessary. I mean, one thing we could do if needed is we certainly could pull a lesson from the 7th grade unit. I mean, if we noticed that that was really a concern that we wanted to reiterate at the 8th grade level, we could regurgitate or reuse a lesson from 7th grade. And I think that that would be okay as well, just to kind of reground kids in that concept. But otherwise, we really recommended the removal of all 3 lessons that focus more upon community change.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
And then there were a couple of lessons for review, in addition to the lessons for removal. The first lesson for review was, who am I? My identity. What makes me unique? And one of the primary concerns related to this was the idea that, was this lesson inadvertently, or was there an underlying intent to communicate about gender identity? And, you know, certainly that is an experience that some of our kids are working through at this level. But this particular lesson had an identity map, and this wasn't, this wasn't the lesson where they're moving forward and identifying that certain elements within the identity map stayed the same. This is kids creating an identity map that could be just for their own reference or to share as a group, depending upon how we wanted to structure that. And the identity map that was shown was for a student named Alex. He identified multiple aspects of his identity. One of them was his gender, and he identified as male. Examples of aspects that make up the identity within this particular lesson include your culture, your family, your gender, your interests, your personality, race, religion, roles, skills, and values. And students are not required to identify any of the, I think the ones that, like the lesson, the identity map has certain ones that they're asking kids to fill in the bubbles for, and those were things like personality, interests, skills, and values. Students are not required to identify their culture, family, gender, race, religion, or any of those concepts.
Yeah, I think it's fine. There were only, like you said, there were only 3 bubbles that were kind of auto-filled on what you were supposed to put in there, and that was interests, qualities, values, and abilities, skills.
Right.
And then you got to pick what else you wanted to fill in, so you're giving them that choice. I don't have a problem with this lesson.
I think it reinforces to kids that there are multiple traits and characteristics that makes each of us unique, and it goes to how we have differing points of view, and
Yeah.
I mean, that's.
It's all back to perspectives.
Yeah. I think it's good that kids are realizing it's okay to be unique, because there's been so much homogenizing, you know, the whole give everyone a trophy thing, that people are looking for ways to stand out because they haven't felt like they've been able to, so I think this is a good thing.
And I will say that the middle school student services team did identify that, you know, if kids are creating these maps, it is helpful for a teacher to take a look at them if students are comfortable with that. And if a student identified like, you know, sadness or something in that required follow-up, that they would be able to provide that to them. Because sometimes in thinking about who you are as an individual, you might communicate something that is indicative of needing some additional support. Can stress help you grow was the next lesson for review.
Yes.
And one of the primary concerns was the fact that there was a definition, they talked about distress, and distress, and the idea of it being a negative, threatening form of stress. It also talked about the fact that you grow from distress, but that was something that we wanted to talk a little bit more about, that term threatening.
I don't know. I think when I think of distress, I think of bad stress or sad or something like that.
But bad stress can help you grow too.
Right. I liked that there was an activity in there where you had like a list of stressors and you got to put them in your good, bad stress categories. I think I got one wrong, so I had to redo it. And then the video in there was about reframing your stress, and I think of the word as reframing as changing your point of view. And they had a whole thing about these kids had to do a persuasive speech, and half of them got told like, oh, this is gonna be really exciting and cool that you get to do this persuasive speech, and the other half got told like, oh my God, that's so horrible, aren't you nervous, blah, 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 and how those different groups performed in their persuasive speech. I don't know, I thought it was interesting, we all have stress, and it's just how we think about that stress and manage it, and like you said, growing from stress.
I think they use the term eustress and distress,
Yeah.
don't they?
But only really at the beginning, and then it's not really talked about that in those terms.
So any recommendations?
I don't have any.
I like knowing that, I mean, if we don't need to make anything, we don't have to, but something I didn't learn till I was an adult was that something that's a negative stress for one person can be a positive stress for somebody else, and recognizing that can make you unique, and that's a strength that you have. This woman, she hated gym, and
Is this me?
no.
Oh.
I was listening to a podcast, and she's like, she just hated gym class, but she's a really good public speaker. And everybody talks about how public speaking is like just the most stressful thing ever. And she's like, man, if there was like, you know, she was just horrified by gym class. And she grew up wishing that, man, I really wish these, you know, my peers realized how easy it would have been for me to stand up and talk in front of everybody, because they only saw me as someone who was terrified in gym class, and it's just, I mean,
I
stories
think
like anecdotes like that are just so powerful to changing how we view one another.
And I think that's kind of the theme embedded through a lot of the things that we've talked about, even the multiple perspectives and understanding what calms you in comparison to what calms me. And, you know, when you talked about that, it makes me think about, with my early learning team, we talked a lot about, you know, working in a team and how do you collaborate and how do you understand one another. And just personality traits, introverts versus extroverts, and understanding that, like for somebody who's very extroverted, what's really calming to them at the end of the week is hanging out with all their peers and, you know, maybe grabbing dinner and a beverage or something. And for somebody who's more introverted, that's the opposite. That does the opposite for me. And understanding that within your team, whether it's a school community of peers or adults, that acknowledging those things in one another is helpful, because then you don't make mis-assumptions, right? You don't make wrong assumptions about why so-and-so didn't join us after work.
Which lead to judgments.
Exactly. Exactly. So, and that's actually a good segue, because the last lesson for review before we go into lessons for supplement was recognizing others' perspective. And this is a story about dad. The father was angry with his middle school daughter because Willa, the girl in the story, her dad is upset because she went with a friend and didn't respond to any of his texts. And she knew that the family rule was that he needed to know where she was when she wasn't at home. She didn't communicate that to him before he left. And he was angry when she got home about the fact that she didn't respond. And the focus is really on helping her understand Dad's perspective, that he was worried and was concerned about her safety, and it wasn't just unnecessary anger about not following a rule. But the question about that, and the reason we wanted to review it is, you know, the worry that because the scenario focuses on Dad being upset and kind of responding in that manner, was it creating an anti-family feel?
So I think this is a great, I mean, it's called recognizing others' perspectives, right? And so someone would view that as anti-family, and someone else might view that as pro-family, because again, there's rules and consequences in my phone contract, you need to respond to my text. Remind
Maybe we
me.
should add that as a sheet available
That
online.
could be a student handout. The dump
An option contract.
Remind me, Emily, I feel like, I wrote down that there's a friend example in this lesson too. Do you recall what that was?
I do not.
Okay.
Let me see if
I'm
I have
on it.
any other notes, no. Was,
I was
this
probably
wasn't
getting
the
tired
one-
by here, so my notes started leaking.
No, I don't, I'm thinking of one scenario where a girl felt left out because her friend had a different friendship, but I don't think that's this lesson. And I did not make any notes about the other scenario, I just addressed that scenario.
Well, I had no problems with that.
I see
scenario,
Carrie, I
so.
see Carrie over there looking
She's
it up,
thinking.
that's her
Yes,
I'm
there
looking
was
at
also
her face.
one upfront scenario as well.
Okay.
I do think this also gets back to that theme of recognizing other people, recognizing what other people are going through, all those pieces, and if we're talking about carrying that theme through, it really does also do that.
I'd recommend keeping this as is.
Okay, all right, so the next section of lessons focused, the feedback in October was really around a modification or a supplement. So where does stress come from? Am I guessing right?
Yeah.
And the primary concern, and I think there's an easy fix for this, one of the primary concerns was that on the student handout, there were 4 buckets of potential stressors, there were examples given, and the concern was related to the specific examples of stressors. That's an easy modification. We can create our own handout and we can eliminate those examples.
Yeah, I'd like to do that, to take those examples out.
And then guide to healthy relationships. So the feedback or the concern related, again, this was a lesson that encouraged students to create a post on social media. So in response to or as an exercise in demonstrating their learning, one of the options was creating a post on social media. And we recognize that not all students have access to social media. That connects back to that supplementary lesson. And I actually, Tani, you said something earlier that I thought was really important to include in this lesson, is there might be times that students who don't have their own social media account want to utilize that platform for some purpose, and maybe that's seeking permission from mom. Can I use your platform to put this out because we are having a car wash for our basketball team and I want to get it out into the community. So it's really teaching them. You may not have that right based upon your family's, or I shouldn't say right, you may not have that access based upon your family's rules and expectations, but there might be times that you need access to that or hope to have access to that, and how do you accomplish that in a way that is in alignment with family values. And then the rest of the lessons in 8th grade were identified as no action.
Is 26 the last lesson? Or the last lesson we're keeping? It's gotta be near the end, no? The one we just talked about, the guide to healthy relationships.
Yes, it's gotta be, I think it is the last lesson.
26 for 8th grade?
Yeah, is 26 the end?
I went to 7th.
I just wrote a little note. I took that lesson and the discuss part I thought was really, really cool. It said, signs for healthy relationships. Someone who supports your interests, you enjoy spending time with, encourages others in a challenge, respects boundaries, values your opinions, apologizes, gives you space, doesn't control you, doesn't put you down. I just thought that was like a really cool way to end it.
It is the last lesson.
It is.
And I think those descriptors really apply to all relationships.
Yeah, I just thought that was,
100%.
So the rest of the lessons identified are lessons that were, in our last discussion, categorized as no action needed. But I certainly want to give you an opportunity to look down that list, and if there's any that you would like to move forward again for discussion, you can absolutely do that.
I just had a note on the pursuing my interests, that the supplement we've already talked about trusted adults who can support you would be helpful there. Just a question on grade 8, unit 3, lesson 19, my stress management plan. Status, there's a student handout that they get. I think that's one of those that is like introspective. They get to keep that to themselves, I think,
Yep.
unless they want to share it.
So
Okay.
actually, I'll recategorize this as there's a supplementary or a modification, because I would want to specify that the lesson is modified so that the stress management plans are not shared. Because in the way that that is framed in the lesson, it does give that option.
Okay. I just think it's also, as much as we want kids to share with a trusted adult, then being able to write down that could be an outlet for them, and then maybe it'll spur them talking to someone else. Maybe they don't need to, and they just, like journaling can be an outlet for people, so I just want, and kids like privacy too, so.
Yeah, and even just journaling for yourself.
Yeah.
It's never gonna see the light of day or shred it afterwards. It's still useful.
Right, and I would hope with all these other lessons that if there was something serious or that they felt like they needed to talk to someone, that would come up at this time, but then still allowing them some space. So those are really the only other notes I had.
All right. So the next step, and I don't know if you have any suggestions or recommendations in terms of full board discussion. So our hope would be that we can bring this forward, is it Monday already? Monday for full discussion. Any thoughts or feedback on what's going to be most meaningful to the full board?
I think pointing out which lessons have been removed and why, and not being afraid of repeating even that loveisrespect.org is completely gone, because the only people watching the meeting are adults usually. I'm not worried about that. Encouraging kids to go look at that. I think, yeah, those are, and also reinforcing that we're doing more the trusted adults, and what that means, and that we're reinforcing that throughout, that it includes parents and family, and that's something that we value.
We'll emphasize the communication plan and those prompts as a venue to extend the learning at home and personalize learning.
Yeah, I think really key is talking about, like Tony said, the trusted adult, how you can be supported, and then also the tech piece, and how they're kind of interwoven into places where they need to be talked about again.
And links or lists of where all the books that are used.
Yes, because we will also present on that separately, but that will come forward for discussion, so absolutely we can do that with the school, with the elementary school counseling curriculum.
Right, yeah, just being as transparent and forthcoming as possible, we've got nothing to hide.
Yeah, that's easy to do. The one thing I do want to bring forward is we did get a few pieces of community feedback. It was individual, it wasn't collective, regarding the investigation of a couple of other options. And I do want you to know I included those recommendations on this document. And you are absolutely welcome to click on the links. There was a recommendation to review some feedback on CISA 6, and then also a website called Fair for All. And I did investigate both of those, and I want to acknowledge that conversation is happening, and that we recognize that may also come forward at the board meeting. CISA 6 is the organization, the Cooperative Education, Services Association that supports area districts. They do have social-emotional learning resources available on their website. It is not a curriculum, or a curriculum resource, I should say. And then Fair for All is another option that was presented, and again, there's some nice information on there. It's really intended as a framework to support a club or an organization. It isn't necessarily intended to be a curriculum resource, but I wanted you to know that we did take some time to look at those and certainly recognize that conversation may come forward. So those are both there as well if you want to take a peek at those. Jen, anything you want to add to that?
No, I think just the process of giving the full board, then we certainly alert them, they can watch this portion of the committee, but giving them at our next meeting that opportunity for discussion, no pressure of action, develop questions, have dialogue, and then go forward with potential for action at a subsequent meeting. I think that's a good opportunity for them to dig in a little bit further and anything that they might be thinking or hearing.
Thank you all. I know this has taken a lot of time, and I apologize for who's ever after.
I heard you buying lunch today.
Is that you? I apologize, but I do appreciate the attentiveness in which you have both reviewed this with us, and I know you've spent a ton of time outside of these committee meetings as well, so thank you for that.
I think the work everyone's done here will do a lot to serve the students, so I'm worth it. I hope everyone feels that way.
Thank you. All right, Tim.
Tim's up with discussion of career and tech ed program update.
We're gonna finish strong, Tim.
Yep.
I will, I promise. I might steal a Mountain Dew from Emily out of her office. Happy.
How do you know there's Mountain Dew in there?
We worked together long enough. Emily.
You have
It's
to.
okay. Before I got in, so it's you to follow along. Yes. All right, so I get to talk about some updates that we want to do around our CTE programming up at the high school. And so, as you know, we have a pretty robust CTE program at our high school campus. We currently have career and technical education, sorry. And so we have approximately 3,000 enrollments this school year in our classes at the high school. So enrollment meaning I could be in 3 different classes.
Okay.
3,000 seats.
Yeah, so 3,000 seats enrollments in classes. So Connie may count for 1, and Aaron may count for 4, and Tim counts for 3. But that's across multiple classes. We have approximately 35 to 40 of our classes offer some sort of post-secondary credit option or ability to test for a credit through MSOE. Most of our courses are articulated with Rains Park Technical College here. Our students 2 years ago earned about 2,600 credits in a year. Our students have a wide variety of options in a multitude of pathways. And as part of our regular continuous improvement efforts, we will review what we call a program of study. And a program of study is the ability for me to come in, take an introductory class, find out if I really like it, and then work my way through multiple levels of a class. Typically, towards the end of that program of study, there's a work-based learning experience option. That might be a co-op, that might be an advanced capstone course, so like our advanced construction course. They go up to Marine Park, they work with Habitat for Humanity, they're on the job site. Last year they built a tiny house. Or they might do a youth apprenticeship option in our community. And so we go through some regular updates, and so I have some small updates today and then a larger update for some different program of study. And so the first one is really around that construction program of study. And the first recommendation from the team, talking with the tech ed team, is we have a course naming problem. And so within our construction program of study, we have a course that's currently titled Manufacturing Systems Wood. And so it's really an introduction to woodworking course that sets the foundation level for all of our other construction courses that come after that, and then feeds into Moraine Park's program up here in West Bend. And so talking with that team, there's a lot of confusion. The kids walk in the first day and they think they're in manufacturing because it says manufacturing right off the spot. And so we have vice versa, kids changing out of classes. And so basically, to get rid of that confusion, we just want to change the course name to Introduction to Woodworking to better align to what's in there. The course description is actually accurate. What throws the kids for the loop is really that word manufacturing at the beginning. They walk in and they go, hold on, manufacturing's on that end of the hallway, and why are we in here right now? And so that is the recommendation from that team for a change in their program of studies. Just a minor change there. So any questions on that one?
Simplifying.
So yes, trying to align words and everything else, and I think I understand where we came up with the term years ago, but yet it's not articulating down to what our kids are thinking, and so we just want to articulate that change. The second program of study that we are currently, and this will be a multi-year process, working on is our education and our early childhood program. And so we have a robust set of opportunities for our students here. And if you look on the single sheet that I handed out to you, it gives you a course, kind of a course overview of both of our programming that we're going to talk about next around education and early childhood and programming and IT. Those are our current structures, just so you have reference to what's in place today. Often when we articulate our courses with Moraine Park, we are at, in essence, their mercy to their curriculum changes. So they're working with their business partners, just like we do, to make sure that their curriculum is relevant to what the workforce needs to be. And so they've made some changes along with DPI in some of the requirements that are required for our students as they go through. And then that has changed what courses we can articulate as a high school here versus what kids would have to take on campus up at Moraine Park after they graduate here or through the Start College Now program. And so working with Amber Halefka, who's our lead teacher within that program in early childhood, in terms of the Moraine Park side of things, we are going to remove the TC course designation from family and community relationships, as we can no longer articulate that class here, so it's not valid anymore. And as part of that class, we used to require that you went out and worked in some sort of a daycare setting or experienced that. That's no longer part of that course. It's been shifted into some other pieces. And so in some of the co-op experiences and so forth, so we would remove that at that point in time. When
Can you just clarify? So we're keeping the course.
Yep.
It loses one of those requirements about observation and
Yep.
teaching, and it just loses the designation.
Yep,
So
it's
we're
no
not
longer
losing the
TC.
course.
Yeah, course stays the same, it's just that TC course designation that goes away. So the course family and community relationships stays as a class. It just is no longer worth 2 or 3 credits at Moraine Park at the same time. And then we would just change the course description at that. The bonus is when Moraine Park redid their curricular structure, they offered us the opportunity to add a TC course designation to our infant and toddler course here, which currently a kid takes the course, they don't get any opportunity to enroll for the college credit up at Moraine Park. So now we will balance this out and we will add a different course into that TC realm, keep our opportunities for our kids up there to earn their credits here at the same point in time. The course stays the same, the curriculum doesn't change, it's literally just we now have an opportunity as a high school organization to offer that for technical college credit versus the course that it's above. And so that's just reaction to their changes in their course sequencing. So questions on those 2 courses above? So within the same pathway, as our students progress deeper into the course experience, they are building towards what's known as the Assistant Child Care Teacher Program. That is a state-run DPI, ends with a co-op opportunity, which is a co-op is a work-based learning experience. Could be with our 4K program, could be at a child care center in town. So we have numerous business partners from the Y to other daycares in the community who let our kids come in and work to get their hours. They get paid and then they turn in their work. And when they're done, their goal being, if they hit all this coursework and they complete their co-op, they receive this Assistant Child Care Teacher Program certificate. And that's kind of that introductory, industry-recognized credential that gets you in the door for our students. And so they can earn that before they leave here. So to better be in alignment with DPI's requirements for this program, we have a little bit of a prerequisite issue in that we need to be able to have students achieve a grade of C or higher, or if they haven't received that grade, because there may be outstanding circumstances for that reason, the teacher can provide that approval at that point in time. And so that's a requirement from DPI that basically you're hitting the standards and the expectations with each of these courses that are listed on here, so that you are hitting it to the level that when you go out and work, you're not doing below average work when I go out to work for Tani's daycare. And I don't have the skills to walk in the door and work, because often you're out there that day and I'm in Laura Jackson's classroom as that assistant teacher. You have to have at least an average ability on those core competencies or standards within that program. And so the state will say you may have to have a grade of C or higher. We're giving the approval of the teacher, who's Amber, to override that also, and make sure that our kids are well prepared so when they go through the course and then into that co-op course, they actually have the ability to be successful out on the job site. So questions around that one?
So we're providing our students with more opportunities by this change?
Yes, so we will make sure our students, not necessarily even more, but we will make sure our students are prepared to walk in to work at the Y or whatever daycare it is versus, yeah, you know, I passed that course with a 59.99 and I rounded up and I'm here and I passed with a D minus, but I don't have those core competencies ready to walk in the door and be successful. And so we're making sure our students are prepared for that entry to workforce at that point in time.
I just have to say, one thing that has been really cool with these child care courses in our community-based 4K is we have had the opportunity to support some of our high school students in one of our school-based programs at the Y or Living Word. And we've even had a couple of students who had accommodations or modifications in an IEP. And we've been able to place them in a classroom that might be a co-taught classroom where there's also a special education teacher teaching preschool-age children who is very in tune to that high school learner's needs. And we've had some really good success. We had a kiddo last year who went through that, was very successful, and was able to get a job at that child care center immediately after finishing the course, which was really cool. So there's kind of that embedded layer of support because our West Bend School District staff is out there in the community at most of these locations where we're placing students.
Well, and this is the definition of career success, preparing for career success. This is.
Yep. And as you talk about it, it's that Jen and I had an opportunity when Senator Baldwin was here at Marine Park. We were talking about manufacturing, but you had the YMCA at the table because of the services they provide to the community. They're looking for workforce just like we are, just like many other places are. So we want to give our kids that opportunity here. And often they can walk in the door with that assistant child care teacher, and now I've already started that. And I'm already working for Aaron or for Tani or for Jill, and now while I'm working, I'm going back to school at Marine Park and getting that next certification at that point in time. And sometimes it's even paid for our students. And so it's kind of a win-win for all of that.
I also think it's cool, an example you said is you guys knew the student that was going to go out there and teach, so you could put him or her where they were going to thrive and really be successful.
Very purposeful placement of where our kids go. So yeah. So one thing you'll notice, and it's not here today, but we will be bringing back in the next year is if you look at our education and our early childhood education pathway, it's very heavy early learning, right? So it's all early learning piece. And then we have an education course that sits at the beginning for any of our students who are interested in any sort of education. So working with that family consumer science team, Actually, before Sharon Kalis retired, she called me one day and she goes, hey, I got this really cool opportunity. I think you're gonna wanna listen to this lady from UW-Whitewater talk about special education aids. And I said, I'm kind of lost, but I will show up to anything to talk about it because there's a reason why Sharon invited me. So our next version, which we hope to be bringing to you next year for approval for the following years, we're gonna expand our K-12 education pathway that would allow our students to go through a pathway, leave here with their special education aid certification, and have potentially 6 credits at UW-Whitewater in education before they leave here. And so that'll be our next plan going forward. So we have to hit some requirements. So when you get into the world of 4-year universities, you get into the Higher Education Council, just like we do at Ring Park, certifications of teachers and all that. But our students would potentially be taking a general education course. So just like every teacher who goes off to college, they take an introduction to education course, and then an introduction to special education course. And then we would work the same way Emily talked about here. We would work to place our kids back into our own buildings with their own work experiences here through summer school, through some of the off-hour experiences that we could, in essence, start to build our own future generation of teachers here.
Yeah.
And so there's some great ideas Lenny and I are floating around and some other districts have done, but that's our next step that we hope to be bringing back for you in the future.
Okay, I'm so excited to hear that. And on a personal note, I have a daughter who wants to do education, but she doesn't want to do preschool and little kids.
Yep.
So she's kind of stuck on which classes she can take that will help her.
Yep.
So this will be too late for her, but I'm excited that it's coming
Yep.
forward and, yeah, that we're, and the technical, like we're dealing with staffing issues and we can
Yep.
put our students in our schools.
I
Oh,
love
I'm
the-
so excited.
I love the community retainment aspect of it as well. We do such a good job of educating our kids, and then they go live
Educate
somewhere
our
else.
kids.
I want them to come back and.
And there are some unique things that we
Connected
can
here.
do in that area. So there's a district way to the north of Wisconsin who, they say if you go through your 4-year college program and you graduate and then get your license, we'll at least guarantee you an interview on a position you're licensed for. Is not necessarily a position, but something to draw you back to that community. We also know we can place our kids in work-based learning experiences K-12 here. So when I was at the high school, we had students and, off hour, I had them helping them out, and some of them would want to go on to be a tech ed teacher or whatever. We didn't have the course to get them in a true program of study at that point in time, just like you talked about with your daughter, Erin. So lot more work to bring that on than just a TC credit in the process, but we hope to be bringing at least one course forward next year at that point in time.
I'm excited for the opportunities.
This is really important for sustainability in our system
Yes.
and kind of growing our own. And part of it, when you talk about like the West Bend Way and those things, then you have kids that come through the system and then come back. And if we can offer them any incentives or placements or things like that, it's very important. And if you look at the way hiring and staffing is going, just not only here but nationally, this is gonna help with that, so it's very.
We also know other districts who have done something similar are seeing an increase in the number of student teachers wanting to come back here. So if I can, and so I'm a great example of that. When I left my classroom here, my former student teacher came back to teach. So the transition was, he was already here for a semester, student taught, went and worked somewhere for 2 years. I came over here, he came back here. That transition to come into the West Bend Way was much easier for him than the person who's walking in, never been in our system at that point in time. So we're really excited, but we hope to be bringing back that first set of changes for that next one. Cross our fingers, everything goes good with UW. So. Or you can tell your daughters to stick around for a while. No, don't, Erin, I will say, I also have phone contracts in my house, so it's okay. There's nothing wrong with those at all. So the last program of study that I want to talk about is encompassing of programming and IT. And so there's 2 really different avenues of that program. And currently we have a very lengthy IT program and a very short, condensed programming or computer science program. And so working with our business education team for the last 1.5 years, and working with that team and they've been talking with their industry partners. We review data from the county, so looking at what is called WOW. WOW is Waukesha, Ozaukee, and Waukesha County. through workforce development. They're telling us that over the next 10 years, there will be a little over 1,000 openings in the area around computer science and IT and networking and all those different types of things. And so in my house, very much we talk about it, I live on the IT hardware side, my wife's a computer programmer. Erin, you know what it's like to live in that a household like that. And so we often have conversations about it and others. And sitting with that team, we really reflected on what were our current hurdles for our kids and what were we missing. And so that team has come to a solution with a pretty much an overhaul of everything. And I gotta say thank you to Moraine Park, who's been really, really helpful in working with us. In our IT pathway, currently you take 4 separate one-semester classes. It has also changed 3 times in the last 4 years as they change their programming over, so it throws kids off in that sequence as they go through. So working with Moraine Park, we have been able to condense some of those semester classes into a semester class. And so what we're doing is currently there's an IT Fundamentals 1 and 2 course. We're going to make it a semester instead of 2 semesters. And what they've approved for us is basically, because we know our kids have to do outside of work class anyways, the time that I would spend, or Jill or whomever in the class, if I spend that extra time on class and I meet my competencies, I can earn 6 credits by taking a semester course here in Westbend. And so we would do the same thing then with the computer hardware and software classes, which are 2 separate courses right now. We're going to condense that down into 1 course, and we're going to then rename that, and then give them 6 credits of opportunity there for Moraine Park at the same time. And so that's going to go and basically condense that down. What we're also going to do is we're going to remove a class that is called Software Applications. And so Software Applications is a course that Moraine Park has split into numerous 3-credit courses. There's no way for us to articulate that as close. But what we're going to redo is the course above it in IT. It's called Intro to Information Technology, to a course called Computer Literacy. Computer Literacy is a course that every student who enrolls at Moraine Park has to take. So we are going to make sure that we offer that here as an articulated credit as we move forward. And as I go to the next screen, you'll see how this lays out before I talk to the ad in here. These courses up here would take literally 2 years of high school to get through. We're now going to give kids the opportunity, in essence, to do it in 1 year, but still keep their Moraine Park credits. So if those students who enroll in those 2 courses, if they complete TCIT Fundamentals and that TC Computer Hardware and Software course, they leave here with 12 credits at Moraine Park towards their IT program. The other piece that we found in going through all this is we have a huge need in IT. I see it, every organization sees it in IT, around cybersecurity. We were missing this opportunity for our kids to gain that experience here. Not that they're going to leave here a cybersecurity expert, but the idea that that program of study gets me some experience here before I go to Moraine Park, Marquette, UWM, wherever I'm going to go after my high school education. So working in combination with Moraine Park and Project Lead the Way, and we currently have Project Lead the Way in our system. You'll see we have that on another slide. We have it at Badger. We also have it at the high school and some other content areas. The team is proposing adding a year-long cybersecurity course for our students in grades 10 through 12. And so our students would take this course as a fundamentals course, as an introductory. They could then split, and they can take these whenever they want to, if it fits in their schedule. This course will also be worth 3 credits through Moraine Park Technical College in what they call an information security course. And so the nice part about it being a year course is we can expand and use that Project Lead the Way curriculum and the Moraine Park curriculum in combination to give them a pretty robust and in-depth experience so that they know what they need to do if they want to go into this field. And they have that base understanding at that point in time. So if a student completes this entire IT pathway right here, they are leaving here with 18 credits total at Moraine Park. And so that's kind of a bonus there. You'll see linked in the presentation, these links will take you to the course outlines for both curricular products for Moraine Parks and for Project Lead the Way's program at that point in time. So questions on that one? You bet, Tom.
I appreciate that we are giving kids the opportunity to get credits at the technical college, and I was intrigued by the combination of the intro course. At what point do the kids get exposed to all these different types of technology opportunities? Because there is just, it's so diverse now, it's not as simple as, oh, I'm interested in computers.
Yep.
And because there's so many pathways they could go down, and this is such a commitment that they're making. Like, my son's a senior in high school, and he wants to study computer science in college, and it's been eye-opening for him to realize how many directions he could go in, and they need to have that before they can make some of these
Yep.
decisions.
So we will often, and when you see our computer science pathway next, there's always an introductory course. We will have kids who will start here and say, oh, this is what this means.
Mhm.
Oh, so you don't really
Because
like
it's
it,
not
Tommy,
what
but
they
then,
think
but then,
it
but
is.
it's then, and I used to see this when I taught our digital media strand too, is, oh, I do the introductory course, and Aaron really liked photography, and you really like animation. Well, here's your next course, or here's where you go there. All of our exploratory courses at the high school, which are introductory courses, are built that way, exploratory. Our students also have opportunities at Badger Middle School through their electives over there, to do some app creation, some computer hardware, software things, and explore, to have those experiences. So I have an 8th grader over there right now, so he's been through those courses. He'll come home and he'll say, I really like what Dad does, I really don't like computer programming, what Mom does, right? And so, you know, or vice versa, or today I got to create an app, and so now he's using that. That's that exploratory piece that we have at Badger, but then also carries over into all of our programs of study. Even that education pathway. Here's an introduction to education. Do I want to go early childhood? Do I want to be a college professor? Do I want to be a high school teacher? Do I want to be a middle school teacher, etc.? That's where we'll have those opportunities in each one of those. So just because I start here doesn't mean I can't end up. And you will have some kids who find out, boy, if I can get through this and this other pathway, I'm even more multifaceted going into a technology world where the more you know, the better.
Well, and even just having the single semester, if someone decides it's not for them at all,
Yep.
then they've only spent one semester.
Yes.
It's
Yep.
not, oh, I just wasted a year or
Yes.
whatever.
Yeah, in our old sequence, it would take me to course 3 to get to computer hardware and find out if I really liked working on computer hardware and break fix and setup of desktops and laptops and all of that. Course 4 to get into computer software study. Now kids are getting there in semester 2.
Well, and I really appreciate that kids are learning this before they make big decisions that are gonna cost them a lot of money when they leave
Yes.
here. I think this is really valuable and something that we should celebrate in the West Bend School District as something that can attract people to our district.
Yeah. I think it is great, and I think it'll provide that. So you'll see that Project Lead the Way piece carry over now to computer science. So we currently have, if you look on the single sheet handout, we have a programming pathway. There's an introduction to programming and then a Java programming course. The Java programming course is articulated with Marine Park. Very narrow in scope when you talk about what exists in the world of computer science today and what you could really go into. I look at what my life does as a computer programmer versus other computer programmers. I know they're two different worlds, right? It depends upon the business that you serve or what you're in and what language you're programming. And you know, my wife will tell me, boy, I really like this language, or I don't want to learn that one. That's harder, I don't understand that one, it's so different. And so we want to give the kids a wide breadth of opportunities to understand and see as we go forward. So the recommendation from this team, after looking at the employment data that I talked about from the workforce pieces, talking to other schools and seeing what they have to offer, and reviewing past pieces is that we adopt and go with Project Lead the Way's curriculum for computer science. That includes that cybersecurity course that you saw on the other page, but the cybersecurity course kind of floats out here. It actually naturally fits well in with IT. And so the Project Lead the Way curriculum is aligned to CTSA, which is the Computer Teacher Science Association, and also our ISTE standards, which is our International Society and Technology Education Standards. There are 36 school districts that use that here in Wisconsin. The team spent some time talking with what Project Lead the Way calls a master teacher, who basically trains other teachers in the curriculum. And I believe he's from Elkhorn. And so we are going to be proposing a sequence that will have 3 courses in it. An introductory course, just like we talked about, Tommy, that will be a semester to give kids some interest and see if they like it. And then 2 higher level courses to go with it. Currently, we already utilize Project Lead the Way at Badger Middle School in both our business and IT courses and in our STEM courses down there. And we use it at high school in tech ed around engineering and architecture and in the biomedical sciences realm. So we have robust experiences and work with them. I'm actually a Project Lead the Way trained teacher in engineering and design. So I did my training 10 years ago. And that last, the second bullet point, a robust training program, I spent 2 weeks on site. Now it's virtual, it's not on site. But you are in with a cohort of teachers going through the entire course curriculum. You are doing some of the projects that the students do. So I sat in a room in engineering design with a science teacher who didn't have a background in engineering, but they went through that. They felt comfortable able to walk in the classroom and teach that curriculum. And so our teachers would be afforded that opportunity through this program, and so they were really excited about those connections because while I was still teaching, I was connecting with my master teachers who were over in Minnesota, and they would share their experiences and what we could do better to make the program better at that point in time.
That's
So,
a good point, because, you know, if you went through college 20 years ago and, you know, you're trying to teach kids now about what's available to them now, yeah, we need this ongoing.
yes, and so that's the one thing we talk a lot about in career and tech ed is how do we ongoing professionally develop our staff around those things. So having partners like Marine Park, a company like, you know, Project Lead the Way, who has ties in with MSOE and those connections, that's where, you know, our CTE teachers are getting their professional development. They might be spending a day at Marine Park with their instructor, out at a local business or whatever else. The unique piece of this program of study is it's going to take us a couple of years to implement this one. So because we have multi-levels of classes and classes that don't exist today, it will take us 3 years to implement the program. And so this is the course sequence. It starts with an introductory course on the far left over there, Computer Science Essentials. That's that semester introductory course for our students to come in and say, do I like this, do I not? And so then from there, our students go to course 2, which is AP Computer Science Principles. So our students would have a year-long experience in that course, and then our students can sit for the AP exam. Now that AP exam is actually mostly portfolio-based, so they're building that evidence throughout the course of the year, and then they have a smaller exam that goes with it. And then our students who are looking for the 3rd year of experience, there's a second AP Computer Science A course that we would offer. Again, it's a year-long course, real in-depth for our 11th and 12th graders, where they can then sit for that computer science course and earn those AP credits, just like our other AP courses. And then each one of these has links that if somebody wants to look at the actual course sequence of what programming and what programming language they're using and all those types of things that you can go in there and look at. When we talk about implementing a program like this, there's a couple of things that we have to look at. So we talked about the training piece and how great that is. There's a cost to all of those types of things. And that is the largest cost. To bring on this computer science and cybersecurity program, it's approximately $35,000 over a course of 3 years, though. $20,000 of that is estimated in staff training costs, but we don't have that large of a department that we will have as much training costs because we won't be sending as many people, and so it may be less. So we will use things like our Carl Perkins funding, which is a federal grant program for training teachers and offering a high-quality program of studies to help our workforce in the future. Our staff would start their training this spring or summer. Right now it's a virtual option at this time. It provides flexibility for our staff. So depending upon what it's in person, I had to go to Michigan for my training because that's the only place it was offered that year. You go live on campus at a university. Now they've virtualized this in our virtual role today that allows our staff to stay home, but attend that for 8 to 9 hours a day and do your 3 to 4 hours of homework each night at that point in time. And so our staff would start that process. We would identify 1 or 2 staff members to teach that introductory course, and then every summer we're going to have staff who continue to go until we get the sequence rolled up. The initial equipment costs would be purchased through our normal budgeting process. We can use Carl Perkins incentive and our local dollars, just like we would work with our high school on other equipment additions to career and tech ed. Our staff will begin the process of adding another license to their teaching license with DPI. So they will have to add a computer science license to that, and so there's some alternative pathway licensing options for that exist in the state. Uniquely, I sit on a team of people across the state who are working on the K-12 state plan for computer science and education, and so that is one of the hot topic pieces of how do we help people who are interested in teaching computer science get certified through the state? And so there's actually an organization out of Milwaukee who has ties into Marquette that will help us with those types of things to help our teachers get that taken care of as we go forward. Currently, we pay a yearly fee for our current Project Lead the Way courses. The bonus is because we have our high school engineering and our biomedical sciences program, there's no additional cost for us to offer this every year. So there's no increase in that yearly budget cost there. And then if we approve this all here in the next month as it goes to the board and goes through the course process change, we would also look, Project Lead the Way has a grant program for districts who are looking to bring in new programs. And so for us, our computer science program would be new. We will apply for that grant, which could cover 4 teacher training sessions, and each teacher training session is about $2,500. So that could be a $10,000 grant proposal for us as we go forward.
What are the backgrounds of these teachers and what are they teaching now?
Yep. So some of them are IT and business teachers. So they're all our current teachers.
Okay.
Some of them are teaching IT, some of them are teaching our programming courses. They're part of the team who came through this. And so then they would have the opportunity to go back and expand on this knowledge. But this will come out of our current business and IT department at that point in time.
Where I see the real value in this is, I mean, in addition to it's obviously very needed, but it is really hard to attract people who study technology into teaching.
Yes.
Because they are distracted by all kinds of dollar signs and, you know, sexy titles and, you know, I mean, this helps support us as a district so that we can provide technical education. And yeah, our teachers need to be up to date on everything.
Often, and that's a struggle, the state team that I sit on talks about, you know, you have your traditional computer science teachers who came out, they typically came out with a math 4-year degree and added computer science to that. Many districts are struggling, just like we are to find that. We used to have a computer science program, you know, 10 years ago when I was up at the high school, it went away because the teacher left and they couldn't find somebody. So in essence, we're growing our own staff to get to where we need to go. Many other districts are doing that, and they're often tied into the business and IT realm because they've been teaching that IT, some lower level, basic level programming. And after talking with our business team at the high school, they were excited with this Project Lead the Way program because you have an array of help and support as you go through this. And you're taught all of it as you go on, and you have that connection back to your master teacher. There's an online community that you can ask questions and see how things are going to. And having, you know, multiple districts in the state who have that, the ability to go see and connect will be huge for them to help our program grow over time.
That's great. Yeah, this is fantastic because we all know that we need to teach this in our schools, but educating our educators to be able to do so is otherwise a gap that we would struggle to fill. So
And I think what's great about this team is they brought this in conversation with me. This wasn't us saying, hey, we need to bring this back. We need to look at this. So we need to look at computer science and programming. This program of study is up, and it was, we want to expand opportunities for our kids. And so this was, there's a couple different options you can go, but this really helped meet the needs of both our staff and our students. And it gives our kids that opportunity. All of our program of studies, we're always looking for that work-based learning experience, some sort of higher ed credit, which this would give with an AP piece. And with the cybersecurity piece, we still have the tie-in at Marine part too.
Okay, I would like to ask a question of the committee. As we put things in our course planning guide for students to do their course selections, the course planning guide, a hard copy, is always given to all the freshman parents and those students so that they can really look through it and not just rely on the digital version. And if this first course in the new sequence is approved by the board to begin next year, I would like us to consider adding the others into that guide to say coming in the future, so that the idea of the pathway starts when the kids are younger. They can still enter it when they're older, but if they do take that their freshman year, if that really is something they're coming into high school super passionate about, I would like it to be in there so that they can see that forecasting out, even though the course is not yet in place for next year. What are your thoughts on that?
I like that idea. I mean, because potentially, if we're starting in fall, right, with
We
course
start
one.
with the first course next year, yeah.
So I mean, a freshman could take it and a freshman next year
Yep.
could take this and then work their way all the way through. But if they don't see it, that path is gonna be there for them, like, I don't know if I would take computer science essentials if that was the only course available to me. So I feel like being able to see it.
That they can see it's not a dead end and
Yep.
that it's not, that there's more coming.
And we feel confident, because AP is, you know, a whole new level. We feel confident that our teachers can be ready to teach an AP level.
Yeah, going through the project lead the way training myself, like that might be the longest 2 weeks. It was 8-9 hours in the classroom, and then we'd all sit in a room at night like this and do your homework, and
Okay.
your teachers are there. You know, they would also have, no different than our other AP teachers who have their experiences and their training with AP, we would offer
Right.
that to them also
Okay.
at that point in time. But I think what's nice is that first course is a portfolio / test. So it really gets kids showing what they're doing. I mean, that's a lot of where the workforce is going and competency-based anyways. So those kids will be able to showcase that as they go forward. AP Art, I'm looking at Laura, AP Art is the same way. It's a portfolio-based type of an assessment. So I think our teachers were really excited and on board for that. You know, they did a survey with their class, and they had kids who want to take that Computer Science Essentials course next year. We have 8th graders who want to take that course next year and have
Sure.
interest in that. So it'd be a great way to segment that out and show those kids that program of study that ties into our ACP when we talk about that academic and career plan of what do you want to be, Aaron? Oh, you have interest in computer science, so let's take this one. Oh, you really like that? Then here's your next step, and it's laid out for you.
Just kind of a general question about, especially IT and computer science world. It's very fluid. How often do you think you know, it's not like math, it's math, it's math.
Yep.
This is ever-changing and
Yep.
growing, probably more than any other curriculum out there. So I'm just curious, like, how often are you revisiting it to make sure you're aligning with?
So you must sit in the conversations Laura and I have. I don't do a traditional length of a curriculum cycle.
Yeah.
So we have a whole program of study change like this, but you will see Project Lead the Way if it follows their other programs. You will see them change out their course, some of their course units, or update them every 2 to 3 years. So it's not a whole course change, but it's now, you know, what we're now doing, this is now the new best practice for cybersecurity. That changes a little more on the fly, just because of that. We just can't go 7 years. Same thing in manufacturing, same thing in animation. You'll see some of that faster where it's more unit specific, not an overhaul like we're doing today. So yeah, that gets reviewed regularly, and Project Lead the Way does a lot of that work for you at that point in time.
I think our TC courses have been updated every year.
Yeah.
In the last 4.
The last 3,
Been
yeah.
on board.
Yeah. The last 3 that I've
They
stepped
have
back in the
to.
CT around, we're always bringing something back. And so when you have a great connection to Moraine Park or your local technical college, we're changing with them.
Right.
Sometimes we're pushing the change, sometimes they're pushing the change, they're business partners, our business partners. So it's a lot more fluid than, you know, I need a new textbook every 6 years.
No, I totally agree, and
Yep.
I'm glad you guys are always staying in alignment with that. I mean, a couple of years ago, you wouldn't have even really thought about having a cybersecurity course, and now it's everywhere, so.
Next will be data science.
It's coming, it's out there.
Analytics.
So, but otherwise, we would bring this to the full board next week, and then potential approval on the, my math, 22nd of November, so that we could get it in the course planning guide for next year along with these other changes. So. Well, thank you. If you have questions that you think of afterwards, feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we'll bring it forward on Monday then.
Yeah, this is a good marriage. One we should be proud of.
Thank you very much for giving all of your time and attention to the learning plan for the students in the district. I really appreciate. I know it was a long meeting, your full morning, but I really appreciate you giving this your full attention. and leading up to it, because you put a lot of time in ahead of time.
Exciting what we're doing here. We have a lot to be proud of.
And so you started today with, how are we going to tell our story? When, as Andrew was doing the data presentation. And so that's a great note to leave on. How are we gonna tell this story going forward?
Okay, well, we are gonna adjourn at 11:34.